All right, so it looks like we are being live streamed. I am now going to share my screen and let me know, family, if y'all can see my screen. Family, do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so it is 5:42 my time, and we are going to go ahead and get things started. If you put what city you are in the chat, we greatly appreciate it. But we are in serious times, and I will therefore respect and honor your time, and we will get things started abruptly because I have so much information to share, and I am very appreciative of your time and of you being here. This is going to be a timely workshop. This is going to be an interactive workshop. In fact, I have redesigned the workshop so that we will be doing what I call a tabletop exercise. And those of you who have ever worked in governance, you know that oftentimes governmental agencies will do preparedness work. They'll do what's called these tabletop exercises. So we're going to do one, but it's going to be centered around us as family. And so it's going to be a dining tabletop exercise, if you will. But it's designed to get the mental processes flowing so that no one in here is going to be bored at all. But you're going to be doing some very important exercises that test your readiness, test your ability to what I call thrive in times of crisis. And so while we're doing this exercise, the objective is not to be right, but the objective is to be honest about what your current capacity is for readiness. And I will explain more as we get further in. But welcome, family. This is the 9 pillars of emergency preparedness that every person of African descent should know. This workshop is designed to help make a mental paradigm that will allow you to not only properly assess what's happening in our world currently, but also to be able to identify who the key players are, because I suspect that some of the organizations that have a direct impact on what goes on our dining table, what impacts our relationship with the medical industrial complex, with food, with water, with our everyday lifestyles, that there are some terms and some entities that you might not be familiar with that I want to add to your vocabulary. And also, I want to shed some additional insights from the perspective of me as a storyteller who has had some very personal encounters of the first, second, third, and fourth kind with homelessness, with joblessness, with the asymmetrical power dynamic that reminds you of how vulnerable you are, regardless of what profession you may hold, what licenses and credentials you may have, that there are some vulnerabilities that we inherently experience based off of our dynamic with the country that we live in or the countries that we live in as people of African descent. So while the principles that I'm going to share with you are certainly something that everyone can relate to and benefit from, this is going to be told from the lens of experience as a person who's encountered some of these things firsthand, whether that is an indirect relationship with Hurricane Katrina and people who were on the ground, or my personal encounters with an alternative lifestyle in national Black movements under my 10 years from the age of 18 to 28, with the organization that some of you may or may not know, a Black nationalist group known as the Nawapian Nation, that had me prepared for what many of you would consider apocalyptic times. And then following that, my own personal crises as a law student at Thurgood Marshall School of Law. So I'm incorporating some storytelling in this. I'm incorporating some practical and professional experience and background as a professional development trainer. So I do want this to feel like, in many ways, conversation. And I want you to feel like you can raise your hand or you can ask questions throughout. Although I have designed it in the event that no one asks questions during the process, that we will be able to move forward through the slides. And I will be asking you questions for sure. And I want you to turn your mics on and even your cameras on, so we can feel more like a village in the virtual world, even though that might be a little difficult. But I want you to be here, to be present, and feel free to share the insights that you have in the room as well. So let me just make sure I have the right thing here that I want to share with you. And I think I do. Yeah, I think we can move forward. Get out something. I keep seeing these people being admitted. Let me check something real quick. Just make sure I am in my right side, because I've got plenty of these. I use Canva. Okay, this is the one. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Does anyone have any questions before we get started? Anything that you want to say, any concerns that you have or anything like that? Feel free to speak now or later. I can't see you all right now because I'm doing the full presentation, but I'm trusting that you all are here. It's showing that we have 29 participants or in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed. So welcome again to the 9 pillars of emergency preparedness that every person of African descent should know. And we have a very heavy agenda today, but I think you will enjoy the topics. We are going to end this presentation with an opportunity to address some questions, but there will be questions that I will be asking of you. There will be prompts that I ask of you. We're going to have an interactive learning experience together, and I pray that you will enjoy it as much as I do sharing the data. This is not me teaching, this is me sharing, and I'm sure that there will be epiphanies that you have. There will be things that I say that you can relate to, but overall, what you can expect to walk away from this experience with today is that we are going to be able to answer, at the very least, these key questions. And that is, how has being prepared evolved since the time of our great-great-grandparents? What vital self-sufficiency skills have we lost over time? And what should we actually be prepared for today? How should we prepare for those things? I want you to understand the important distinctions that exist between disasters, emergencies, and crises. And we want to talk about the type of mindset that one has to have in order to thrive in any type of these situations. What are the levels of preparedness, and where do you as an individual and even family household stand along this spectrum that I want you to think about? And what should you do when SHTF and you begin to see others around you panic? Also, I want you to think about what you can start doing right now to not just survive, but to actually thrive in challenging times or times of crises, disasters, or emergencies. And then what can you learn beyond the workshop that we do today about this? So what I would like for you to do, so this is actually going to be a little bit modified because this is recorded. It's actually presenting live on YouTube. But I would like for you to respect the the intellectual property that hopefully will one day enable me to enjoy the freedoms of life and not use the slides in a way that you haven't necessarily requested permission for. I do want you to do this. If you haven't got something to write with, please go grab a pad, some pens, some paper right now. I ask that you not record any of this presentation, but I am available to give this presentation, and prayerfully you will be so blessed by it and excited by it that you will invite me at some point to share it. But that remains to be seen. I have to earn that amongst you. And then again, questions that we had will be entertained at the end of this presentation. So those are the house rules. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so here is the opportunity for me to give you a little bit of insight about why I do what I do. So by profession, I am an attorney. I'm licensed in the state of Texas. My desire, I wanted to practice estate planning law years and years ago, but I got thrust into some very uninteresting and unfun areas of law with a law firm here that I am actually no longer with effective yesterday. I put in my resignation on the 16th because ancestors, the Most High, and my own personal impetus to do the divine work I am sent here to do have been pushing me in another direction. So if I have encountered you here at the UN and you come to this workshop, thank you for trusting me with some of your time today. And I trust that I will do justice with it because I do not take it for granted. Aside from being an attorney, I'm actually an author. I have written 4 books. One of them is called The Divine Self-Care Strategy. I just released it. It's an amazing book that talks about the wellness strategies that women of African descent from around the diaspora have been using for millennium around the elements of air, fire, earth, and water to secure both freedom and health. And I bring that up, not because I just want you to check that book out, but because it's also part of the theme that I use in incorporating around emergency preparedness that we're going to discuss today. So in addition to that, I'm a certified professional development trainer. I've taught classroom management. I've taught small business workshops and legal workshops for the Urban League. And I have done strategic planning facilitation for behavioral health organizations. And so I love working with people to make massive mindset shifts around important concepts that directly impact people of African descent, my people, the people I love and care for so deeply, because when we are centered in our divine purpose, everything falls into place in the world. And when we are not, the world suffers as well. But this piece on emergency preparedness came about in a really, really interesting way. And some of it I'm going to share with you right now, and some of it I'm going to share later when we get to the food pillar. But this kind of fell into my lap about 8 years ago in 2016. It was the second iteration of my emergency preparedness epiphany. And it was a part of what I call a divine vision, where in a spiritual way, I had been directed to view the next 3 years. And this wasn't based off of politics. I was never very, very political, although I've always paid very close attention to what happens in politics and around the world socially and economically and everything else. But it was around this theme of 3 years to acquire resources, followed by an indefinite period of uncertainty and grief. And I would say that very closely aligned to that timeline, I'm grateful that I adhered to that impetus. Now, keep in mind, family, I can't hear you guys. So if I ask you for a question or something, just put a chat up so I know y'all are here, because I have my full screen on this thing, so I don't really know. Hi,
We'll just say, yay, you're doing great. And thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, beloved. Thank you. All right. I feel like I'm in the room by myself, and I have my other laptop here, but it's for my supportive notes. But yeah, so this is going to be very, very interesting because I come from a line of storytellers and medicine women. So all of these experiences have informed the presentation that you have today. So this is going to be a real African-centered experience, but this is something unusual for me. I normally don't do this until I have warmed people up a little bit. But I decided to do something a little different today because I want everyone to start off really getting a deep sense of appreciation why I believe the ancestors wanted this presentation to happen this day during this important event at the UN, where we are honoring our continued work of our ancestors to put forth our agenda and make sure that not only the world is aware of what it is owed to us by them, but that we have an opportunity to cross-examine one another's lives, environments, experiences of oppression, and strategies for overcoming that oppression here at the United Nations at the second session for the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. And so I would like to thank the International Civil Society Working Group for allowing me as a delegate to present this topic as an official UN side event for the Permanent Forum, for the ICSWG's Permanent Forum side event. So thank you, Sheldon. Thank you, Dr. Vicky. Thank you, Prophet and Yanwu, and all of the co-chairs and Courtney who have helped to facilitate this and make this happen. I really appreciate you and I see you. Okay, so again, a tabletop exercise is a term that I'm sure Sheldon knows. This is in governance, the people who govern us, they don't take that work lightly. And they often recognize that one of the worst things that you can do is just move on through life as though everything is always going to be okay. So sometimes they engage in these simulations that are designed to test their own readiness mentally, resource-wise, economically, to determine whether or not they are equipped, whether there are any gaps in their preparedness and in their ability to respond appropriately. And sometimes even in the biblical sense, I like to refer to it as to be a custodian of resources, right? That is the divine injunction of people of African descent, or whatever we identify as a part of the Creator's divine humanity, is to be the divine managers of the resources of the world. And part of that is to be able to assess what has already happened, to assess what is currently happening, and then to use that information, that data, in the spirit of Sankofa, because really, as a strategic planner, when I started looking at Sankofa, I realized, wait a minute, this is strategic planning is an African principle, and it's based off of going back, as we say, and fetching it. But what are we fetching? We're fetching data. And we don't just fetch the data because we are glorifying ourselves, but because we want to analyze the data. And then we want to design the desired future. And so all of our efforts around the work that we do as liberation movement, as families, as individuals, as even in our personal careers, is designed to create the desired future. So let us take a look at a very, very real scenario that is based on current events that are actually happening right now that you may or may not be aware of. And so I'm calling this, because it's not a governmental exercise, but it's a personal, individual, and family exercise to stimulate your mind. So let's call this a dining table top exercise. It's a mental simulation to just simply assess your readiness for what is referred to as some type of an economic collapse. And while I'm taking you through this exercise, like I said, if you do not have a pen, please grab a pen right now. And I also want you to think deeply about the slides that you're going to be seeing and about the information that I'm going to be sharing with you as well. I want you to actually consider the possibility that the world we live in is very predictable at times and very unpredictable at other times. And so when we get to the part of this simulation where I ask you to take an action, I'm going to have something on the screen that you can look at and either do the exercise while looking at that data on the screen, or I will send you a link in the chat that you can actually use that actual link to do the exercise, and it will provide me with the outcome. But the point of this exercise is not to be right. It's not about wrong. It's about where are you right now in this particular scenario. So are you guys ready to get started on our dining tabletop exercise, as I like to call it? I'm not going to start till I hear something. Y'all going to speak to me. I don't know. I can't see. I don't want to be here by myself. Somebody say something. Unmute that phone.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay.
We're ready.
Okay,
We
great.
are always ready.
All right. So let me align my other screen because that is important to me as well. I just want to make sure I got my chat here. Okay, so don't cheat. I'm just going to put the link in the chat, but don't cheat. Don't click on the link yet. It's just there. Don't click on it. I know some of y'all are fast. Don't click on the link yet, but wait till we get there. I just want to have it there for when it's ready. I'll tell you when to do that part. So this particular tabletop exercise is rooted around this important information. So there were these scientists who in the 1970s, they were at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, right? And these guys were doing some very important data analysis. They were crunching some numbers, and MIT is a very, very analytical institution, very prestigious institution, as y'all know. And this institution determined that they could actually predict, and I promise you, you can do your research, the actual date for the fall of society. Are y'all hearing me? This is not something I'm making up. This is actual. How many of you have heard about this on CNN? I haven't. This is so important. The scientists in the 1970s at MIT literally determined the actual date for the quote, unquote, fall of society. These are analytical data crunching analysis that predicted what they call the actual fall of society. Now, here are some terms that I want you to be aware of. They use something called the LTG. Have you guys ever heard that acronym before, LTG? I told you this is interactive, so don't even put your mutes on if you can. Work with me here. Have y'all heard the term LTG before? Raise your hand. Okay.
No.
LTG is the model, and it means limits to growth, right? LTG is the model that they used to determine the fall of society will literally take place in the year 2040. I want y'all to be with me here. 2040. Now, remember I said I was going to be sharing with you some really important names that you need to know about and how these names are playing critical roles in your life and in the experiences that you have, whether you are aware of it or not, right? So you might not see her on CNN. You might not have ever even heard of her, but this is a very important woman. Her name is Gaia Harrington. She is the Director Advisory for the Internal Audit and Enterprise Risk at KPMG, and she's an advisor to something referred to as the Club of Rome. This woman is considered extremely intelligent and highly influential. Now, Rome is a very interesting city to depict because of many reasons. One is because Rome had its what a long time ago. Can y'all guess the word? It's a 4-letter word that starts with the letter F. It had its fall ages ago. So the Club of Rome is actually a think tank that was established in 1968 in Rome, Italy. And it consists of thought leaders, business professionals, former politicians, and some of the biggest minds in science, sociology, and economics. Do not sleep on the importance of these two names, the Club of Rome and Gaia Harrington. And the reason I want you to know about Gaia Harrington in particular is because Gaia made an important statement, and I want to quote it to you. She said that the 2100s will be comparable to the 1900s in terms of world population, industrial output, food, and resources. I'm going to repeat that. According to Gaia Harrington, this is the woman who advises the Club of Rome. They listen to her. She is a director and advisor for KPMG, among other things. You're not going to see her on CNN. You probably wouldn't even have heard her name prior to this, but this woman is behind some of the most important and critical political and social issues that are shaping our world. World leaders listen to Gaia, and I want you to listen to what Gaia has to say as well, because Gaia has told some very important people in the world that the 2100s, which is what we are in right now, the 2100s, right? Those are going to be comparable to the 1900s in terms of world population, industrial output, food, and resources. Now, this isn't Minister Farrakhan, Dr. Malachi York. This isn't anybody that we know in circles who is saying this. This is MIT, Gaia Harrington, KPMG, the Club of Rome, and all of the think tanks that operate underneath them. Now, I just participated in a Red Cross simulation around preparedness and disasters. Everyone is taking the work of this think tank very seriously, and I want you to do the same. So now that we've got that out the way, let me tell you what this really means for you, because the study put the collapse in or around the year 2040, right? And my question to you is, what if they were wrong, whether unintentionally or intentionally? What if their dates were off? And what if a global crisis catapulted us into an economic collapse 20 years too soon? Instead of 2040, what if this prediction actually really started to happen in 2020? And we are only beginning to see the real impacts because it's 2023. Now, my question to you, family, is if this really jumped off in a way that we didn't plan for, and you start to begin to see things happen as could happen in a worst case scenario of an economic collapse occur unexpectedly tomorrow, as we are always hearing about the threats of a nuclear war between Russia and Ukraine, about the collapse potentially of the economic system as we know it, banks are in turmoil, and groceries are becoming harder to come by. The prices of food is being gouged. Everything that we are seeing could come to a halt as we know it. And it could be compounded by something like a blackout, an EMP. What if the food shortages proliferated so desperately over this next week and chaos ensued so vastly that our governments at the state, federal, and local level determined that the safest thing would be to enact martial law and put down lockdowns so that no one can leave their home and everyone had to be in their home by 8 p.m. every night, no matter what? And the violence started to erupt, and people just began to panic and scramble for their basic necessities. And you were told that you could not survive on going to the grocery store whenever you wanted to, or running to the local restaurant to grab what you needed because some combination of unfortunate events happen. So what I want you to do right now is, if you have some paper, which you should, is I want you to take 3 minutes. It is, according to my clock, 6:12 in about a couple of seconds. I want you to take 3 minutes to reflect on how well equipped you are right now to provide for yourself and your family, considering what you have in your home right now. Now, I want you to answer the questions that I'm going to present on the next stage very thoughtfully, but I don't want you to spend too much time. I'm presenting the questions now, and this is a readiness form, and it's simply asking you to evaluate based off of what you have in your home currently. And you can also see this in the link that I shared. So if you're more high tech and you want to answer the questions through the link, then you can do that. But I want you to say, based off of what you have in your home right now, how prepared are you to provide for yourself and or your family based off of your water supply, your perishable goods or food storage, what's in your refrigerator that you have to eat within a week, what your canned food supply might be, what your bulk supply might be, meaning foods that can last up to 25 years, if properly stored. If you have any freeze-dried food that could last for up to 25 years, if you have any dehydrated foods that could last up to 25 years. And if you don't know what those things are, then just do your best to answer it. But I want you to think about your household. The guards are standing on the neighborhood at every corner saying, it's too dangerous. Please don't come out. We're the National Guard. Stay in your home. We'll be bringing you supplies shortly. Please, it's too dangerous. Don't leave your home. What do you have in your home right now? And can it last you 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, or 1 or more years? So just take 3 minutes. It's 6:13, and I'm going to start back up at 6:16. Time starts now. All right, it is 3 minutes, and if you have successfully answered all those questions to the best of your ability, I want you to just put a yes or a thumbs up in the chat for me. And if I could get, 5 people to just volunteer about what it was about this form that made you either feel that you were completely ready or that you were completely unready. Just be completely honest with me and tell me, as you were answering these questions, anyone, you can start off, just unmute yourself. What were you thinking in terms of how ready you were for a type of emergency where someone told you perhaps that you might not be able to leave the house for a week or longer?
This is Dorothy Butler.
Uh-huh.
All of my answers is no. I couldn't even answer it. I have no preparedness at all. No week supply. So no nothing.
No, nothing. And how did that make you feel considering what Gaia Harrington and the Club of Rome? Do you feel like this information is something that you should be aware of as well?
Yes. Exactly. I should be aware of it. But what I was also answering myself, I know I was online and I looked for that preparedness. They got some people online that got preparedness, food and water and stuff like that. But I'm like, I don't want nobody Caucasian. I want somebody Black. I mean, at least I feel better. I mean, I don't know what they giving me. I just don't feel safe about buying everybody preparedness, disaster, food, water, and stuff like that. But I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to get it from or whatever.
Thank you for sharing that, beloved. And my goal is going to be that by the end of this presentation, if you're able to stick with me, is that you will have a different perspective and you'll feel empowered about some things that you can do to position yourself to be better prepared and to not be victimized by the next major event that might happen that you could or could not be expecting. Anyone else? Thank you so much, beloved. You can mute your phone. Now, this exercise is on purpose, and I'm going to explain to you all the things that I'm asking you that you might not be aware of here about what these terms even mean if you're not familiar with them. We're going to address that in one of the pillars, all right? So you're not going to walk away unarmed, but I wanted to just get the juices going. Anyone else? Can I get another volunteer to talk about how they felt filling out the form? Were you ready? Were you not? Were you like, yeah, I got this covered? Who's got this covered?
I felt confident
Sheila.
because oh.
Go
You
ahead,
can go
beloved.
ahead.
I was gonna say I felt confident because, unintentionally I stock up on all those things whenever they're on sale because they're not perishable. And so I have a pretty decent supply of most of them. I'd probably say the thing that I'm probably the weakest on would be canned goods.
Okay.
But
And
lots
so
of like grains.
So how are you in terms of your water supply that's in your house? You think you're
Oh,
good?
yeah, we always keep plenty of water because nobody around here likes to drink tap water.
Very good. Okay. And what about let's say your ability to have grains? How much grain do you have in your home?
Oh,
And how
plenty of
long?
grain.
Plenty of grain. Okay. And how many
Yeah.
people, may I ask, are in your household?
2.
Okay, perfect. And do you have any idea how much grain you could consume within a week?
Probably between me and her, probably if we were like trying to exist off of just that, probably about a cup or 2 per day. So maybe like a pound, 2 pounds in a week.
Okay, and so we're talking about grain, we're talking about things like rice, like maybe
Right.
couscous, quinoa. Have you considered a way to prepare that in the event that your stove didn't work? Because let's say you had a gas stove or an electric stove, do you have an alternate way of preparing those bulk grains in the event of a power outage, for example?
You probably have to just do like overnight oats and stuff like that.
Okay, these are things that I'm asking on purpose, and I want you to think about them, family, because they're very important, and we will be addressing this. Okay, one more person. Anyone else? I heard another voice in the wilderness. Speak up, sis.
Yes, that was me. Hi, Sheila. This is Alexandra.
Hi, Alexandra. Thank you for being
Hi.
here. How did you feel about filling out the readiness form? Where were you?
Well, I'm not as prepared as I thought I was. I had some things, but what got me was the 25-year shelf life.
Okay.
Something that I haven't really paid attention to in regards to what I do have. And finding those items that have that 25-year shelf life. And then also thinking about, these things are expensive. Budget wise, these things are expensive. And to, you kind of like, get what you can, because I'm originally from Miami, and down there they say, have 3 days supply. And I think it went up to now to like 3 weeks. Okay, you can manage and do that, little by little. But when I saw your numbers here, like, 25-year shelf life, I'm like, oh boy, how am I going to do that? And, and how am I going to store these grains, somewhere? And currently I'm in New York. So it's like, okay, well, if something was to happen, I'm not carrying around, I don't have all these things with me. Right. So, you're asking about water, and I'm like, well, I only have 3 bottles of water right now. And if something was to go down and you're like, you can't move, you got a shelter in place, I'm screwed. So what is the contingency plan when you're not home?
All right. So this was the point of this exercise, family. It is not to discourage, but to get the mental juices flowing. Why I say from a perspective of a person of African descent is because of our blight in this country and our plight in this country. Unfortunately, resources like water supply, food gathering, food distribution, food preservation, these have often been outside of the realm of the everyday person from African descent's grasp. We have been made content or been led to believe, or sometimes it's the only thing that there is in the state of survival, to never feel that these are things that are within the domain of our reach. It's not our responsibility to worry about the water, where the water comes from. But recently, my family in Philly, shout out to Philly, my family in Philly experienced something unusual, but that is going to be more and more common. And that is the fact that they were sent a rather abrupt and quite rude alert to not drink their water starting in, let's say, 10 hours. And that was really the extent of the data that they were shared. They were told that there is a possible contamination of a certain borough in Pennsylvania, and that the water may not be safe to drink. So we're going to be exploring these types of situations and what the impact of those things will be to us as a community. Because as you are aware, there are some very unpleasant forces that are always not in the best interest of people of African descent, that have control over resources. And then there are some who are very well-meaning, who have our best interests, but it's almost impossible to distinguish between the two. So we need to arm ourselves with knowledge and then surround ourselves with others who have similar knowledge base, and then be able to organize ourselves. And I hope, if nothing else, that sparks these conversations so that we can redirect our attention while we're constantly, definitely in the battle for reparations and African freedom and global movements. We also have to be consistently aware of the present. So let's go into what emergency preparedness is from the African perspective. And I want our ancestors to weigh in this, but I also want to do a comparison of the present reality. Are y'all up for this with me? Are we here? Is everybody still here? Do I have your attention, family? Because 2040 is right around the corner, and they are on time, but they're not telling us what they are telling each other. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the movies that are coming out and how these documentaries for others and entertainment for others, are shedding some insights about what to expect and some possible scenarios that you might want to consider. So let's talk about what the state of being prepared was in the past and how things have changed. And we're going to examine some of the basic life skills really quickly that our ancestors had to use to survive, and whether they were surviving natural or man-made disasters. And then later on, we're going to talk about the 5 types of situations that develop into disasters or crises or emergencies, and be able to articulate what those are. So I want to walk away having earned your time today, if I may well. So our great-great-grandparents, they clearly had some skills that we don't have today, because they were able to survive without electricity. They didn't have hospitals that had all the amenities and all of the data collection, analysis, and resources that our hospitals have today. They didn't even have indoor plumbing, depending on how far back you want to go. They didn't have grocery stores. I don't know if you realize this, but one of the first grocery stores didn't appear until the late 1800s, early 1900s. So it was a real phenomenon when people could suddenly go to one place and get the majority of their dairy, their meat, their grain, their even sometimes sweets and jellies all in one place. So these are luxuries that we take for granted, that we can run into a Walmart and grab a tire, grab a pair of pantyhose, and then run over to the aisle and grab an onion and put it in the microwave. You know, like those are just luxuries that folk back then did not have. And so why our ancestors want to inform us about how important it is to reconsider what we've lost is because the world we live in today could really quickly be thrust into the early what? What did Gaia say? The 2100s will be very much like the what? Early 1900s. So this is something that the world is bracing itself for, but somebody isn't being honest with us. Their wisdom, our ancestors' wisdom, has been replaced with online shopping, with major food supply chains, instant meals, and limitless forms of entertainment. So we're competing right now with entertainment, because really this room should be packed with hundreds of people for a topic like this, because I know that if a tornado swept through here right now, we would be the main ones featured on the news crying because we didn't get any allotment of water or ration. Okay, so here's something I want you to be aware of. And remember, I said I want you to take some quick notes, because now I'm going to speed through really fast because there's some important topics that I want to get to. And one of the things I want to bring to your awareness of is in the 1850s, only 15% of the US population actually lived in what is known as an urban community. Did y'all know that? Only 15% of the world, of the United States, lived around the world, actually, the US population particularly. Only 15% of us in the 1850s lived in an urban environment. That means 85% of people lived off of the land. They lived in rural environments where you could not easily access a pack of gum at the grocery store or gasoline. You might not have even had a car. So the people worked and lived and gained sustenance from the land. And it was their ability to grow food that enabled them to live in what was known as the era of self-sufficiency. Y'all with me? Here's something else I want you to realize, that during the 1800s, there was no big grocery stores where you could just take your family to purchase everything from an onion to a pumpkin to a loaf of bread. Eating out was absolutely rare. 200 years ago, food and its preparation. Now, here's something I want you to think about. It is food that dictated the structure of the family. Food and its preparation dominated people's time and energy, and it stood at the center of family daily life. In other words, agriculture, as Baba Oduno likes to say, is the source of all culture. The structure of a family where a woman and a man and kids, see, you had to grow your own labor force in the early 1800s. So when people came together, they weren't thinking about, oh, the children that they wanted to send to college. They were thinking about food and who's it going to work this land. So it was agriculture and the need to gain sustenance that kept families together, because people had to light fires in order to get their food. And that same fire would heat the house and sometimes even burn down everything in its sight. So life was very dangerous. And in fact, in the old days, people had this saying that if you played the ant and you stored away vegetables and your men were good hunters, you could make it in the world. But if you played the grasshopper in the summer, you were going to have some lean days in the winter. Now, another important fact to note that 42% of Black adults, 37.6% of white adults, and 30.6% of Asian adults, 35.5% of Hispanics consume fast food on a regular basis. Only 20%, according to a survey that was conducted in 2019, only 20% of people cook their food on a daily basis. Now, this is interesting because processed foods make up 70% of the standard American diet. Many people have grain, but most people wouldn't even know how to take corn and turn it into cornmeal to make bread. This indicates that you might have a good supply of staples, like I do, of raw bulk vegetables and grains, but if you don't have the ability to process that grain so that it could turn into mush or oats or cereal or even breads, then you're going to have a hard time. So there's some important skills that we need to reacquaint ourselves with. But here's what I really want to get to: food preservation. Food preservation is storing food. And in other words, to have long-term food storage, remember that list that talked about 25 years, things like wheat, baking powder, dried corn. These are the kinds of food that can almost store indefinitely under the right conditions and in the right containers. And I promise you, I will explain more about that when we get there as well. I'm just doing a refresher. Now, another thing that I want you to be aware of, because we're talking about ancient times and today, because sometimes the past catches up with us. And I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there's an event that took place in 1859. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there was a phenomenon known as the peculiar institution that was also happening in 1859. Now, this event was called the Carrington event. And it is what happens when a natural electromagnetic or a geomagnetic superstorm, a flare, flies off of the sun and comes into the Earth's atmosphere. Well, in 1859, when this happened, it was referred to as the Carrington event. But for some reason, life went on as normal. Why? Can anyone guess why life went on as normal for the majority of the world that was impacted, that saw the skies lighting up and would have been terrified by just the signs that they would have interpreted in the heaven, something akin to apocalypse for them. And for others, it may have been sign of the freedoms that have been promised them. If you've read my book, The Divine Self-Care Strategy, but that's another topic for another day. But at any rate, this is an important thing. And the why it's important to you to know, and I want you to write down the word Carrington event, because this is a part of the vocabulary that you are going to teach yourself and your children along with the word EMP, because they occur every 150 years. Now, I am not that good at math, but I know that 100 years from 1859 is 1959. And I know that add on 50 more years, you're going to get past 2000. So what does that tell you, family? We're overdue for an EMP. Remember, I want you to keep Gaia Harrington in the back of your mind and the Club of Rome, because they have used these models. And these models are not just based off of AI, but the models that they used to predict that 2040 date was based off of a conglomerate of data that took into account natural phenomena and unnatural phenomena like war and conflict between humans, but also conflict between nature and humans, like the massive solar flare that spewed off electrified subatomic gas particles, sending it towards the Earth. Now, somebody was impacted, but in 1859, there was only one group of people who had the type of technology that would have been completely disrupted, and that was the world governments. They were using the telegraph. Now, remember, I told you this is an African story, right? So in 1859, there was a woman who was running between Canada, New York, and Maryland to help to free some individuals from captivity. And we know her as Mother Harriet Tubman. And there was a man who in 1852 got on a stage in front of 600 people and declared that it is not the light we need, but the fire. It is not the gentle shower, but the thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. That was the Honorable Frederick Douglass on July 4th, 1852, speaking before the Ladies' Anti-Slavery Society and invoking the divine power of the heavens to come down and free his people using what he had only known to have access to, which are the four elements. And I promise you, within 7 years, which is next day mail, we got an EMP. Now that's just my little ad lib, but there's some storytelling for you, right? So I told you it was going to be entertaining. But at any rate, there was a solar flare and we are due for another solar flare. So keep that in mind, because the people who are crunching the data have certainly considered this as well. Every 150 years, we're overdue for an EMP. And make no mistake about it, EMPs can be man-made. And in fact, in 2008, there was a report that the National Academy of Sciences issued that talked about the extensive social and economic disruptions. Remember, Gaia Harrington, the Club of Rome, the think tanks, 2040. If you're just coming into the room, you missed something that we were discussing earlier, where a real life tabletop exercise that we did to get our brain going about the potential for a catastrophic or not so catastrophic event that could interrupt our lives. And so we'll have to come back during the question and answer session and fill you in. But this EMP reality for us today, because remember in 1859, everybody was farming. So people saw it. They were definitely mystified. Some were horrified by what they saw happening in the skies, the heavenly bodies, the sun flare. But everything about the way they gathered food, prepared food, and consumed food went on as normal, because they did not rely on the grid like we do today. So do you know that this study that was conducted in 2008 put an estimate of about $2 trillion at the max and $1 trillion at the least to deal with the damage that would be caused by a natural or man-made electromagnetic pulse? How do they know? Well, they leave nothing to chance. In 1962, the United States actually conducted a test, and it was called what, Sheldon, are you here? Starfish Prime, where the military detonated a 1.4 megatron thermonuclear bomb and actually measured the consequences. That's how they know how much it will cost. Okay, so our reliance on technology for every basic need could literally put our very survival on the line. And if I don't tell you this, and you don't study this on your own, our grandchildren are going to be the ones to suffer, because no one cared to tell them what the realities that the rest of the world are preparing for. Y'all feeling me? Okay.
Yes.
So let's just talk briefly about the level of skills that our ancestors had. And I'm gonna run through this real quickly. But when you are taking some time to live in what I call two worlds, so I'm always learning about the new science. I got to learn all the new latest technology to keep up with work and my work as an attorney, and I got to know all the latest software. But I also live in the 1800s. And so I have a sewing machine, and I get on my sewing machine and I try to sew, and I have needles and thread, and I have a hand cranked wheat grinder, corn grinder, and I'm preparing for a life in the world of perfect technology, but I'm bracing for a world of the early 1900s. You have to have a dual timeline in your mind at all times so that you can always get back to the basics of air, fire, earth, and water, the 1900s, to continue to survive, but thrive in your own households and communities. Because if you don't do it, who else will? So our ancestors had an effective knowledge about soil conditions. So these are things that I want you to think about. Jot some of the words down that resonate with your spirit. If you make time to do some research, to watch videos, to even take a course on some of these things, to make yourself an asset to your community and to the world around you, so that when resources need to be dispersed, you know, if you've got some skill sets, if you've got something to bring to the table, then your likelihood of thriving and not just surviving increases exponentially. Okay? Now, if I say something that just doesn't resonate with you, raise your hand. Just chime on and say, wait, repeat that. I'm not here with you. I can't see y'all. All I can see is my screen. So just occasionally give me an amen corner or something, right? Thank you for being here. Crop rotation patterns, how to prune and do pest control without harmful chemicals and pesticides, how to do composting. They knew about something called sun exposure charting. You know that certain plants need certain types of sunlight during certain times of the year. And then seed preservation and germination. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are some things that I've learned on my own. Like if I'm able to get some collard greens, and in the collard greens sometimes come with the bottom still intact, I keep dirt in my house in the kitchen window, and I take that bottom intact. Like if you ever cut you get a whole celery stalk and you cut the bottom off, don't throw that celery stalk away. Cut the base off, keep it intact, and put it in dirt. You will be surprised at the return that you get. And even if you don't have dirt, you can actually just put it in water. That thing will resprout. Sometimes it's beautiful. You can actually get enough to get another stalk off of it. If you collect them continuously, it will continue to grow. It's phenomenal. So those are just some things to just do as exercises. But there's some other food-related skills that have been lost to time that are impacting our ability to harvest, process, preserve, store, and cook food when all you have are raw ingredients. Things like how to smoke and dry and salt meat. Now, I'm going to confess to you, I am a vegan, but I'm going to also share a few stories with you that will help to inspire you to think very broadly about all of the luxuries that you have that get to classify yourself as a vegan or a pescatarian or a vegetarian in times of abundance. Because I've been through some times of lack, and I can tell you, when there is that asymmetrical power dynamic between you and the provider of food, whatever you claim you are, they're going to make sure that that's the opposite of what you have available. And I'll talk more about that. There's a psychology there. Canning, dehydrating, pickling, fermenting, vegetables and fruit, root cellaring. What is that? How do people preserve food? Potatoes, you read the stories of our ancestors. Booker T. Washington talked about the fact that his poor little hut that his mom shared with him and his brothers and sisters and his dad, that they had to put potatoes to get through the winter underneath the bearing floor that just had a little piece of wood. They would dig a hole in it and just cover it with a piece of wood and a cloth and keep it under the ground. That's called root cellaring in some ways. What about kerneling? What about grinding fruit and vegetables? Do we know how to do that? Have we even heard of that? Have we ever seen a whole red berry called a wheat berry if you eat bread? And what about cutting, thrashing, grinding, milling, sifting wheat? How about milking, creaming, churning, butter, and whipping stuff? And drying and grinding and preserving spices. Now, everybody in this room has somewhere along the spectrum between animal flesh that they eat and grains and vegetables that they eat. So something up here relates to everyone. But what I would encourage you to do is think about these terms very broadly. Refraining from waste and repurposing everything is a skill that each and every one of us. I just described, instead of throwing your celery butt away, take that butt and put it in some dirt or some water and just enjoy watching it regenerate itself. And what about preparing food from scratch, right? What about taking corn and turning it into a flatbread? Or porridge. One of my favorite things to eat growing up was my stepfather's mother, Miss Vicky. She would do some amazing things with that cornmeal, that old raggedy cornmeal that just be sitting in our closet. And she would turn that thing into the most delicious, heartwarming porridge. How many of you know how to make porridge from water and cornmeal? That could be salty or sweet for your babies if you needed to. Hunting, foraging, and fishing, navigating without electronic gadgets. Do you know Mother Harriet Tubman had her own form of technology? Raising livestock for clothes and food, natural remedies. We got herbalists in here. We've got essential oil experts in here, first aid, treatments, and even midwifery. These are some of the skills that we need to prepare for. Now, what is an emergency? What is a crisis? What are a disaster? And we know that these things are used interchangeably, but do they have specific meanings? Do they invoke specific rights for governance and imposition of powers by government? Absolutely. And I want you to know the difference between these three terms. So the next part 2, we're going to go deep into emergencies, crises, and disasters. So take a sip of your water or your tea. Put your pen in your hand, get your paper ready, and let's do it. I do have another exercise for you, but I want you to watch this. Okay, now I didn't tell you why I wanted you to watch that, but I want you to, just based off of your memory from your visual, write down as many of the types of events that you can recall that happened and put some of them inside of the chat when you're done. So just real quickly, we're going to take 1 minute and just take 60 seconds and write down as many of the emergencies, disasters, or crises events that you saw in that one 60-second video that you can recall. I'll give you one. I saw something about, no, I'm not gonna give you one. You do it yourself. Let's see how good your subconscious memory is if you read between the lines. All right, time starts now, 6:49. Stop at 6:50. I told you we're doing some interactive exercises, right? Yeah. Right, Alexandra. Okay. 30 more seconds. Let's get some more in there. You didn't need to hear it, Mama Dorothy. It was just visual. It was just music. Okay, Gwendolyn, good stuff. Thank you. All right, come on, y'all. Anybody else see anything? Okay, I'm gonna play it one more time. Pay close attention. Let's see how many different events you can count in here. Breaking news. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 'Ready for life. Okay. All right. So I counted at least 11 things. So go ahead and put a couple of them in the chat, and then we're going to move forward to the next step. Mandatory evacuations. Yes, Alexandra. Mass protest shootings. That's right, Mama Ray. Martial law. That's right. Family wasn't able to hear. Okay. Power outages, civil unrest, food shortages, war. Somebody was on it. Empty shelves. That's right. Okay. And Mama Vicky said, proud to also be the first GEO AG global ambassador. We can grow in rocks. Okay, Queen. That's a whole nother workshop right there. No soil as well. Awesome. All right, family. All right, give me a thumbs up if this is interesting, if I still got y'all's attention, because you know that's important to me. I want to keep everyone here. Give me some thumbs up if we're still together in this. Store closing, that's right. Civil unrest, martial law. Did y'all see the shooter in there? There was a massive shooter. These are things that are occurring every single day, and somebody's lives are impacted. Somebody said they didn't see anything about earthquakes, volcanoes. Okay, well, we got that too. We'll find something. Maybe that's what the evacuation was about. I don't know. Did anybody else see anything about an earthquake or evacuation? I didn't see anything. I think there was a flood in there. Don't you dare accuse me of forgetting the natural disasters. No, just kidding. Okay. All right. So let's get into this because I think this is really, really important. And then thank you guys for participating. I want you to know about 5 major threats to normal life. You don't have to guess. They're all here, but jot them down if you can really quickly. We know about the threats to life that come up because of natural disasters, right? But there are 5 types of each of these categories that we're going to break down one by one so that we can think very broadly about the circumstances of life and how they show up before we go into the next thing. So natural disasters are one thing. Those are things that we know like thunderstorms, tornadoes, tsunamis. In fact, when I was just in the UN building earlier, I stumbled upon a display where they were discussing, they had these beautiful pictures of people in changing circumstances. And it was interesting because they were talking about the fact that there's really no such thing as a natural disaster. And the way they described it over at the UN building was really interesting. And I'll find it here on my phone as I took some pictures of the phenomena. They had a very interesting thing to say about it. And I think one of the things that struck me is it said something about the fact that there is no such thing as a natural disaster, but there are what they refer to as, let me see if I can pull it up here. There is no such thing. This is at the UN site that I'm at today, because you guys know, if you're not aware, that I'm participating in the second session for the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. And here at the UN headquarters, there was this display. And the display said, there is no such thing as a natural disaster. There are hazards, such as earthquakes, floods, droughts, cyclones, and some cannot be prevented, but we can curb their destructive power. In other words, stop them turning into major disasters through careful and coordinated planning that is designed to reduce people's exposure and vulnerability to harm. Okay, I'm hearing a little bit of Gaia Harrington in there, and we'll talk a little bit more about some insights from Gaia Harrington in the Club of Rome later. But I hope you got those jotted down, because what we're going to be discussing is what are the negative impacts of unmitigated crisis, right? Meaning that let's say a law firm has been hired to represent a company that makes cars, and the company has been getting some indications that there's an issue with the brakes. If that company is aware that there's an issue with the brakes, they are aware that their 2012 Jeep Patriots, for example, all have a vulnerable brake issue. But instead of doing a massive recall and having everyone come correct the problem, they just ignore it. They are not mitigating a crisis. They are ignoring the crisis. That's what we do. We say, yeah, I know about disasters and all that stuff. There's nothing I can do about that. That's going to happen. That's the work of God. Nothing I can do about that. I'm just going to take this $500 and I'm going to go see Beyonce and Jay-Z because YOLO, I only got one life, right? That's unmitigating crisis. Like if you can look around you and see that there are issues man-made or naturally occurring around your ability to access food, and that doesn't inspire you to look at yourself, your family, and your community and try to do something to mitigate a potential crisis around that, then you are a derelict of duty. I hate to say it, but it's true. But if you don't mitigate crisis, there are some harms that can come from that. Anatomical harm, like unexpected death, injuries, illnesses. We saw that recently with, I don't even want to say the word, but y'all know what I'm talking about. There's an event happening right now about that. Infrastructural shutdown. Hospitals, dialysis centers, and pharmacies could go down in the blink of an eye. And there could be psychological harm if crises aren't mitigated. Like people will suffer from anxiety, neurosis, and even depression. So this is something that impacts people of African descent more than anything. So here's another exercise. I know y'all like, okay, I graduated from school a long time ago. But I want to test you really quickly to find out if you are aware of the meaning behind emergency, disaster, and crisis. So just in your own mental head, draw a line between the correct definition and word. The words are emergency, disaster, and crisis. And the first word or the first definition says a situation which could overwhelm local capacity to withstand, cope, and recover, necessitating external assistance and involving multiple stakeholders. That's the first definition. You got to match that with the appropriate word. The next one, hey, how'd you do that, Alexandra? Cool. The next one says, okay, we know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing it on my own privately to answer. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's cool. I want to know how you do it. We're going to let Alexandra be our testee here.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Keep going, Alexandra, but I'm just confused how you were able to do that. That's so weird.
You know what? Well, I got to backtrack and see how I did that too.
Come back. Tell him.
No, keep going. Okay, the next one is a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. And that can be personal or confined to a small population, like a family or a company dealing with a very serious problem. Is that an emergency, family? Is that a disaster, or is that a crisis? Take your best guess. No one's going to know if you got it wrong or right, unless you tell us. And determine whether that's a crisis, a disaster, or an emergency. I want to know what you're thinking. And then the last definition is what's natural or man-made situation that may result in substantial harm to the population or damage to property? Is that an emergency? Is that a disaster or a crisis? All right, y'all ready for the answers? Say something.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Y'all gonna be honest and tell me if you got it right? Or you gonna act like it's all
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes.
All right, here's the answers. An emergency is a natural or man-made situation. It could be either or, and it may result in substantial harm to the population or damage to property. Now, why is that important? Remember the word emergency order as it relates to the COVID-19 crises, right? And that's how certain medical decisions were being made. So these words have legal and federal implications as it relates to our life. And we need to be able to move intelligently. Whatever your position is on these things, you need to know the difference between these words. A disaster, on the other hand, is a situation in which overwhelms capacity of the local government to withstand, to cope, or even to recover. And that type of overwhelm necessitates external assistance. So remember the earthquake in Haiti, where the government of Haiti was in no position to deal with the consequences of that earthquake. They had to get external assistance, and it involved multiple stakeholders. Does that explain it a little bit better? So you can see the earthquake in Haiti was a disaster. Why? Because the government was overwhelmed by the situation and they were not able to recover on their own. It necessitated what?
External assistance.
That's right, from other governments. So Korea, France, Europe, Asia, everybody drove into Haiti for the good or the bad, and they sought to introduce themselves to help the situation, right? Now, ironically, a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger, and that can be personal or can be confined to a small population. You ever heard of the opioid crises that's happening in the Midwest? Small
Yes.
population, right? You ever heard of the pipeline to prison crisis or the education crises? Right? It's limited to a small or relatively small population. It is a time of intense trouble or danger or difficulty. Got to learn the language, right? And why these terms are important. A crisis. Our communities are always facing crises. Then you have a natural, like earthquake, or man-made, like a terrorist situation that may result in substantial harm to the population, like biochemical warfare, or even the current situation in Ukraine and Russia. Okay, so is that helpful? Did you guys learn something?
County level, I think.
Yes.
Okay,
I
so
have a question.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when you were talking about disaster, and I get what you're saying in regards to the vocabulary of the words and the legal, the legalities of it.
Implications. Mhm.
Yes. For disasters, needing external assistance, meaning that they come in because you've been deemed that way, or because that entity is asking for it?
Both. Sometimes the disaster is so overwhelming, no one needs to even ask. Sometimes there are already agreements in place, like we're hearing about treaties between Taiwan and the US. These are pre-existing agreements that if A happens, B will happen, right?
Okay.
So there are some understandings that are already in existence. That's why there are these organizations and think tanks and even agreements between nations that if A happens, you will intervene, so B will happen, right? So there are some pre-existing things, and then there are some disasters that are so overwhelming and so devastating, like let's say the tsunami in Japan, where no one even asks. People just go in and do what they deem necessary to mitigate, right? To do something to address an issue that it's pretty obvious that the people are no longer capable of dealing with. Okay.
Okay.
So that's why we got to understand these terms and maybe even the impetus that certain entities may have to create these things. All right, so let's dive into threat number one, because we were talking about that there are 5 types of each, right? So a natural disaster, it could be an earthquake, a hurricane, a winter storm, or other disaster that strikes your community. It may prevent you from having access to food, water, and electricity for days or even weeks. But by taking some time now to store up emergency food and water supplies, you can provide for your family for a period of time. So let's talk about the 5 types of natural disasters that there are. Y'all ready? Geological disasters. If you're with me and you're unmuted, say it with me. 2, hydrological disasters. 3, meteorological disasters. 4,
Extraterrestrial
disasters. Now,
And other
disasters.
Other
Now, I know people are
disasters.
thinking extraterrestrial, but years ago when I was in the Nawapi Nation, I was explaining the term extraterrestrial because I know you think of UFOs, but anything that is extra on Terra, that is astral, is extraterrestrial. So that could be a solar flare, a space object that has impact. Anything that comes into the Earth's atmosphere that's foreign to the Earth is extraterrestrial or extraterrestrial. So there's nothing spooky about that. But geological disasters are those things that happen as a result of movement of the Earth, right? Geological, look for the word geo, right? Avalanches, that's internal to the Earth. Earthquakes, it's internal. Mudslides is on the Earth, and sinkholes, those are in the Earth. So geological disasters is underneath your feet. Then you have hydrological disasters that's involving mother water, right? The floods, your tsunamis, your limnic eruptions. Then you have meteorological, that's your weather related. That's your blizzards, your winds, your tornadoes, your cold waves. It's not the light we need, but the fire. It's not the gentle shower, but the thunder. So when Barbara Frederick Douglass, he was calling on geological, hydrological, and meteorological help from the heavens. And then he got the extraterrestrial, he got the EMP from the solar flare. So you better be careful what you say about the Honorable Frederick Douglass, okay? All right, threat number 2, it can be said that the biggest difference between a natural disaster and a man-made disaster is human intention to cause what? Damage or destruction. Arguably, one could say that Mother Earth and Father above, or whatever your preference is for the divine, arguably some people would say that there is no intention to cause harm, but definitely there is no argument that when human beings get in the way, it is because of their intent to destroy life or property. And then
yes, it is.
and we know that firsthand, right? So here's something, I'm big on ancestrals and what they had to say about things. And if you aren't aware, I'm completely obsessed with Queen Mother Amy Euphemia Jakes Garvey. And surprisingly, I found out that even she had something to say about this situation with man-made disasters and preparedness. And this is what she said. If a nuclear war hurled against the United States of America from Asia without warning, then those who survive in good health, Black and white, will have to journey to areas that are not populated and contaminated by fallouts and rebuild the nation. So this was in 1927 when Queen Mother Amy Euphemia Jakes Garvey was contemplating the world, okay? That's something to think about. Nuclear war in the 20s was a topic on her mind. And it was obviously on the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey's mind because they were trying to move towards global African governance. All right, man-made disasters. Now, this is interesting because I'm sure we've all heard about some of these events. Now, here's some 5 kinds of man-made disasters. Y'all with me? I'm losing people. We're down to 26. We go up and down, but stay with me as long as you can. I know this is a lot of information. I know we got a lot more to go. But acts of terrorism, like armed assaults, assassinations, bombings, kidnappings, mass shootings. Those are acts of terrorism. Those are man-made disasters. And remember what the definition of a disaster is, right? It has the potential to cause so much harm that governments are incapable of recovering on their own, right? Wasn't that the definition of a disaster? Necessitating external help sometimes. So that could be a local government that needs external help from the federal government, right? Okay, so transportation hazards. We've seen a lot of train derailments these days, right? Driver shortages, that's a disaster. That's a man-made disaster. Deteriorating infrastructure and even weather that can cause transportation or risk hazards, right? And then you have environmental accidents. This is very devastating to nature, like oil spills, which is also devastating to people who eat those things in nature, like fish, and then the water again supply. When Philly had their lake threat, right, it was going directly into the water pipes, and particularly those in Black communities in that zip code. And then you had industrial accidents, and of course, you know, everybody was impacted by it. It's water, it's all running through our pipes, but some communities, Flint, are impacted more than others. Nuclear explosions, that's an environmental accident. That's not a nuclear warhead, but the facilities that could explode. And you have stampedes, right? You can have a stampede, that could be an environmental accident. And war chemicals. So technological hazards are something that's kind of a newer phenomena, where we're having cyber attacks, which is one of the major threats that the World Economic Forum has been telling us to brace for, and that they've been doing simulation exercises for, that will also have the potential to shut the grid down. You also have nuclear radiation, toxic waste, and dam failures, right? Part of what made Katrina so devastating was the failure of the dams, whether intentional or unintentional. And then you have other hazards that are scientific, physical, health, and animal. And you can use your imagination around the animal one. Okay, now here's threat number 3. Do you guys remember that the collapse of the US housing market in 2006 and the havoc that wreaked on the United States and on the world? Well, financial crises, unfortunately, are quite common in history, and they can oftentimes cause what's known as an economic tsunami. And that's really, really bad. So let's take a look at some of the crises that have, or the disaster, remember the words we're using interchangeably sometimes, the financial disasters of the last few hundred years, starting with the British bank crises. It's an interesting story. I want you guys to look that up on your own. But the first credit crises happened as a result of the greed of the British, who were feasting off of slavery. They were so arrogant, they had so much money. But there was one guy who made a decision to leave Europe and not pay his debts, and it sent Europe into a financial panic, and everybody went to withdraw their money at the same time, and the entire structure collapsed. That's known as the 1772 credit crisis. So write that down, do some research. Then we had 1929, 1939, a depression. Now you need to know the distinction between a depression and a recession. I don't have time to go into it here, but I have touched on it briefly so you can learn the distinctions. Now, 9/11 presented a recession. Now, if you notice the dates, 1929 to 1939, that's classified as a depression. But 9/11, that only lasted 8 months. That's considered a recession. Lasting 18 months was considered a recession. And the COVID recession, which at one point was a recession, but is slowly moving into the Depression era level. And then you have the Asian crisis of 1997 that raised the inflation rates really high artificially. And then you have financial bailouts between 2007 and 2008 related to the real estate bubble or the mortgage bubble or whatever the bubble was. So jot those down and let's have some discussions about these later. Y'all with me? I'm gonna move through a little fast. Now, threat number 4 is the threat that comes from animal and human interactions as a result of zoonotic transmission of pathogens, right? Emerging infections. These have afflicted humans throughout history. And here's a few examples of it. We had the chlorella pandemic in the 1817s that's still prevalent. We had something called SARS, or the severe acute respiratory syndrome, that took place between 2002 and 2003. Then we had the swine flu, 2009 to 2010. Then there was something called MERS, the Middle East respiratory syndrome. Interestingly enough, that's between 2015 to present. And now we have COVID-19, which is arguably man-made or naturally occurring, wherever you fit in the data is up to you. But these are some of the health emergencies. See the language that almost these words have a ring, like health emergency, financial disaster, financial crises. So get used to these terms, because I want you to know how they move and how they move the world. Okay. We have an artist in the room who's adding their beautiful red lines to our slides, but I like it. It's interesting. And I'm so curious how that's happening. Okay, so then we have personal crises can be times of growth. Personal crises is the threat number 5. I have personally had so many wonderful and unwonderful experiences with these. And you see my fella over here, he's counting his coins and he's got his whiskey on the other hand. This is how he deals with crises. We don't want you to deal with crises this way, okay? Personal crises can still be times of growth. I've personally experienced this throughout life. Everyone goes through these events. And if you have a strong network or a strong spiritual foundation, it can make it a lot easier, and the transitions that one must go through on their journey to man and womanhood much easier to manage. But every person experiences a crisis differently. So we have to be sensitive to the individual circumstances, their environment, and help provide people with tools like Prophet Ann Yan Wu and her healing circles, and Dr. Vicky, and people who work in the area of psychology, and Dr. Sharon Bethia, who is here with us with the African Americans or African Psychological Association. All of these entities that are here to address our spiritual needs as well. And whatever system you have, they can help us along with the knowledge that we need about what's really happening in the world. Amen. All right, Ashe. Okay, so personal crises, again, we've got the 5. So we've got 5 types of threats, and we got 5 categories. So we got 25 that we hit. Accidental, this is sometimes fortuitous events that create remarkable change in a person's life. Sometimes these are negative ones, and they're considered a personal crisis. Like this poor fellow here, he's so disturbed, he can't even eat his spaghetti. And you have family. Family is meant to be a form of stability, and it should be a happy institution. But the reality is, it's just not that for everybody. And then you have health is a personal crisis. Someone can get a new diagnosis. And most people are going to experience some type of a health crisis, either personally or with someone that they know and love. And then you have developmental crises. You see this wonderful, handsome couple here that has just, gained a little pounds throughout life. Well, sometimes people go through developmental crises where the passage from one stage of life to another can force a guy to challenge up his manhood and go get him a Ferrari, or for a young lady to go do something wild, like change her hair from, brown to orange. These are developmental expressions of personal crises. And sometimes it's just style. So don't assume that just because someone is having gray hair or that they're having purple hair and they're only 3 years old, that they're having a crisis. It could be style, I suppose. But then there is the economic, the one that likes to personally come into my life and challenge everything I know about the creator. And so the economic crisis is the one that is really a challenge for us here in the US, where we're under the gorge of not just our personal development and our health and our family, but then we have to deal and contend with racial systemic oppression. So one of the most common types of personal crisis is financial, and it's often external and internally driven. Any questions so far, family, on the 5 types of threats to human lifestyle and the 5 subcategories that I hope you are now at least familiar with if you weren't cognizant of them before at this level? Anybody with me still?
I'm here.
Okay.
Mhm.
Try
I'm
not to
here.
lose anybody else. I know people gotta go. I
I'm
want
here.
They're here.
Okay, great. I do
Yeah.
want you to do this on your own. I want you to do some work on your community. And I just want you to take a time to actually Google your state and find out what are the major types of disaster or emergencies that have occurred since 2018. And that will be a good place for you to start in terms of how you should prep for your emergency preparedness. You know, in other words, if you're living in California and you're constantly dealing with earthquakes, you might want to put more emphasis on a to-go bag. If you're living in an area with floods, your preparedness might look a little differently. You might have to have a little bit of a different. If you're living on an island that's constantly subjected to tsunamis, your preparedness might look a little different. But get to know your region and find out what resources, what news blasts, what stations you should be tapped into when you get your communications ready. All right, any questions so far? We're gonna move right on. I'm gonna speed through this because it's kind of intuitive, I think, but I want to introduce you to something that's called TIATWAKI, which is an acronym that means the end of the world as we know it. Okay, I've had my own personal TIATWAKIs and I've experienced them socially and culturally. I'm sure you have too. We've talked about some, but if you are my age, you probably are aware of something that was called Y2K, September 11th, the Great Recessions of the 2007-2008 period. Those things came really close to being the second Great Depression. And now COVID-19, that anyone isn't preparing for the end of the world as we know it, is now they're the ones who are on the fringe of society. Because I assure you, the rest of the world, they might not be telling you, but they are bracing themselves for tough times to come. And those could be personal crises. Those could be financial crises. Those could be health emergencies. Whatever it is, people are taking this stuff seriously. And I know for sure Gaia Harrington is, and the people who listen to her are. And those are the people who make policy that will dictate our well-being and lives for generations to come. So I just want to run through this real quickly because you do have to have a level of physical discipline in order to deal with the times that are coming for us. You definitely need to have a level of financial discipline to be able to make sound financial decisions, meaning that when we start looking at some of the costs associated with these 9 pillars of emergency preparedness, which we're about to get to in the next couple of minutes, that there is some money that you need to be able to invest in this. And I would argue that instead of suggesting that you don't have money, that you reassess the way you spend your current resources. So for example, and this is no judgment, as a matter of fact, I'm not even going to say that, I'm gonna leave it where it was. Emotional discipline and social discipline. It's very important that you engage in activities that align with your goals. You need to avoid people who express immorality, poor character, and bad judgment. If you find that everyone in your circle is only concerned about video games or going to a concert, or if they're extremely negative and they don't want to talk about anything, because to just simply talk about the realities of the world is to invite that into your life, I would argue that our ancestors did not invite chains and slavery and whippings into their life. Some of them were just born into that unfortunate circumstance. But I do agree that many of them turned their minds on nothing but liberation and freedom. And that's why we're able to sit here and have these conversations today, because somebody else did the prep work. Identify the national and local risks to yourself and your family. Like I was just sharing, just do some Google research. If you live in Maryland, look up natural disaster or orders or lockdowns or whatever the keywords that you think. It'll lead you down a path that you will find resources that you didn't even know existed. And the keyword I want you to walk away from today is mitigation. Mitigate. Take steps to prepare or to minimize the potential damage to body, property, mind, and spirit for things that we know are coming. Why? Because folks are telling us 2040 is their date. Now, You also want to have the 4 elements of a management mindset, and that means to be creative. Sorry, I was trying to see if I could get rid of this red line. This sister, I think it's Alexandra. Can you see if you can delete this red line, beloved? I don't know what kind of magic powers you have.
No, I tried to. I thought it was me, but it wasn't me. So I put in the chat. Real quick. Go, whoever it is, or everybody, just go and try. Down to the left corner, there's something that looks like a pen. Click that pen, and then something pops up on the top, and then look for the thing that says eraser. So I thought it was me, but it's not me.
Oh, maybe it was me. Sorry.
Okay, so there, it's gone.
Okay, thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
Okay, so we need to be creative. We need to combine our intelligence and our imagination. We need to be consistent. We need to identify the issues and the problems and take appropriate steps to solve them. We have to be goal-oriented. We've got to set, define, and articulate our predetermined goals, which means you've got to have some goals, and then you have to integrate and harmonize your human, physical, and financial resources. That's called being a good custodian of the resources in your life and the earth. And when you have this, you are better able to manage the world and the struggles that may arise in it. Okay, my desire for you being here today, and my being here today, is that you don't get caught off guard when your area goes off grid. So this is something I wanted to touch on, and I've talked to a couple of people about this, particularly because between the intersection of disaster, emergency, crisis, and the lack of mitigating steps or unpreparedness are the fact that women under these duress type of situations find themselves involved with people who are oftentimes so overwhelmed with despair. Typically, this happens during times where there is an extreme change in the environment. You cannot go outside. You cannot live your life as normal. Perhaps it's a lockdown that goes beyond a week or 2 or a month or 3. Then there are situations where violence is the law and order of the day. There's a war. We typically don't experience war on our land, but that could quickly change. The world is an ever-evolving place. But around the world, we have come to the conclusion that these periods of disaster in particular, like where in Haiti, the earthquake took place and people found themselves without running water, without city lights and street lights, and women are exposed, only being separated from other people by the thinness of a cloth tent for long periods of time. We found horrifying stories of violence against women. And in fact, there have been studies about why women experience so much violence during these times. People, of course, women experience what they call gender-based violence under normal circumstances, but something about disaster and crises and emergencies that take place over a long period of time, the implications are really devastating. And as women of African descent who are constantly under the gorge of oppression and who have been engaged in war for the last 400 years, whether you're really cognizant of it or not, we've already seen indices of these things happening in our communities, particularly around the issue of rape, sometimes incest, sometimes being subjected to random acts of violence. The stresses that oppression cause only exacerbate this. So women need to be really, really careful and very mindful of what I'm referring to as the 9 pillars of emergency preparedness, because partially what you're doing by doing preparedness, because you can never really be prepared because there are so many circumstances. But what you can do is put in some steps to mitigate the damage of the unexpected. And that's really what our goal is today. We have to be cognizant of the fact that when times get tough, when there are long periods of power outages, when your husband, Mr. Electricity, if you're here, we call him Pepco or BGE, wherever Mr. Electricity is in your community, that replaces the husband of the 1850s who was responsible for going out and finding the raw materials that were required to sustain heat in the house or to produce the fire to cook the beer that some fortunate person was able to confiscate from nature. So I tell people all the time, I'm a bad mamma jamma on my own. When my husband, Mr. Electricity and Mr. Running Water in the tap pipes is available, because these are the things that afford me the luxury of moving independently, all right? But turn those lights off for 3 or 4 days and let me find a spider. The first homeless man looks like a master hero, okay? Because Sheila Brown doesn't do spiders in long-term darkness. When those candles went out and that e-bulb that I have is no longer working, men look real good to me. Okay. And so, of course, I'm attracted to people all the time. But what I'm saying is the power dynamic shifts tremendously in times of crisis. And because of the vulnerable nature of our bodies and environments, and because oftentimes we're the protectors of children, we have an added protection. I'm going to share a few stories when we get to that part. So I don't want to belabor this and I don't want to offend anyone, but before the Klan comes looking for their food, we're going to have to deal with the unprepared, undisciplined, disenfranchised within our own communities who are going to be looking for resources in the easiest way and from the least protected groups and members of society who they believe may have resources. I don't feel good about what I just said. So I'm gonna just move on, but it's a discussion that needs to be had. It's icky. It's icky. Anybody got a comment that they want to make me feel better? I hate saying.
No, you're right.
I have a comment. Hi, I've been in the car this whole time, so I've been listening to you guys, but I just wanted to throw 2 things out. And if you talk to it, I may have missed it in between driving. One is that there were a lot of programs on PBS and another station, the History Channel, before MSNBC purchased it and junk came on it. And there were a lot of survivor programs on it. And one of the things this gentleman said that keeps in my head is that in the event there's a catastrophe, going back to the different definitions and everything you've been talking about, that you should make it to the public library and you should get the sewer plan. So if you have to operate underground, right? You have the plans for, underground, the sewer system to be able to navigate through the community. I don't know if we talked about that, but that's something, especially when you got people coming in and everybody's not exactly their regular. I'm trying to figure out the best way to put that.
Yeah, thank you, Queen. That's a very good point. That is not something that has ever come under my radar. So thank you for sharing that. But what the sister is saying is that you've got to learn your community, and you need to be aware of the fact that sometimes you may find yourself having to go beneath the earth, right? And so what structures are in existence, because we know that there are pipes underneath our feet. And if there are pipes underneath our feet, there's technology and there's infrastructure there that may serve as a resource in times where it's not safe to be on the surface because of chemical situations, or where the water is. Someone might need to go, if I'm understanding what she's saying correctly, is where there is water, there's also the pipes, there's also technology, there's also resources, and perhaps even a place to retreat to if necessary. What we don't want to do is wait until the day that the disaster happens and say, oh, let's go and check on that, library resource. The library might not be open. Like
Not only not open, but now a lot of places are changing the libraries, getting rid of hard copies and moving it to digital or online, which is a problem in and of itself, because if there's a problem and the power lines go out, you're done on that. The other thing, real quick on water, I had the Y2K book that I still have from Y2K, and I heard you mention that earlier, because they were talking about in the book, they were talking about water in particular. and filling your tub up immediately. I mean, they gave some really good tips, and I was listening to you. Somebody talked about water. Oh, when you were doing how long can you survive if there's a shutdown? And I was just thinking about how they're getting tips on where you can get water in your house in the event the water is cut off. But just as a quick note, and I'm sure you probably talked about it, the water in the bottles may not be available. Plus, the city waters are regulated, not the bottled water. So I just want to throw that out. But this is the only chance I had to talk. So thank you guys for accommodating me for a minute.
No worries, Queen. That's very good. Thank you for sharing those insights. Anybody else want to say something?
This is Prophet. I wanted to, this is a favorite topic of mine. I have someone I was sharing some of the, not all of this you're sharing. I would really like to even see more of what you had talked to, who said they had heard this for so long about these disasters that they just were not really interested. And plus they had plenty of money in the bank. I said, well, one of the disasters that could happen in other parts of the world is banks didn't open. So what do? How do you, if you can't get your food or whatever? And this person said, well, I'm not worried about that because it's a grocery store down the street. And I said, yeah, but what if you don't have any money? She said, I'll just steal it. And I said, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you try to get a few dollars if you have plenty? Why wouldn't you get some at home so you have something to work with? And why be out there with people that don't have any money? Because if they don't have, so I'm going back to what you had said, there are people who don't have, and they'll be, looking around for where they can get some resources. Why be out there with them if right now you have time to prepare? But anyway, just so that also Kansas is not known for earthquakes. We're known for tornadoes. However, a couple of years ago, we had between November and February, I was told anyway, I experienced several earthquakes, but someone said we had small earthquakes, like 100 small ones. Don't know where. We don't do fracking, but out the clear blue within that span of time. And I called down to the city and they told me about tornadoes. I said, what about earthquakes? They had no idea, didn't have any plan. And so it's like, well, what do we do? Anyway, I'll mute that, but
no, that's good stuff, because it's saying that we're thinking in terms of these issues now, right? And we're having conversations, if not in our own minds with some others, and we're wanting to get some answers and organize. And so this is all very important. And we're about to go into what exactly you need. What are the levels of preppers that there are? I'm going to give you, as we move forward, and we're going to go real fast through these, but I'm going to give you the exact numbers of pounds of grains that you're going to need, how much water to store, how to purify water, what are the 3 methods of water purification, what are the 3 threats to your water, how to properly preserve, what containers can you use to store water. So we are going to cover some of the things that these prophetic young ladies have shared with us. Are there any brothers in the room that want to chime in on what you're feeling about what we're talking about? Is it relevant? Is it superficial? Are you feeling it? Not so much? Where we are right now, because we still got a lot more to go. And now we're about to actually move into the actual 9 pillars. That was just the prep work. Any brothers in the room want to give us some advice or encouragement? Where are we with the brothers?
Yes, indeed. Great information. Definitely necessary to start to get into the mindset and to come up with strategies and plans in order to make sure that we're prepared for the next disaster or emergency, being that, even when things are in abundance, we have a difficult time. So just imagining, when things are, at a critical peak. And then, as equally importantly, we need to be thinking communally as well. So it's good that we're gathering as a group to discuss these things and gathering as a community, because it's going to take the community to get us through, situations like these.
And a race first mindset at community, a race first, it's going to be really devastating when you walk outside and you realize that your neighbor is not neighborly, right? I have some neighbors that I've never spoken to. It's not because I don't want to. They have just made it very clear that they're not interested in knowing me, right? And so you have to navigate these strange circumstances and times, but pay attention to the way I always say it like this. How can you expect a governmental agency that is accustomed to seeing you as other, as even animal historically, to have your best interest in times of crises when they can't even have your best interest or consider you humanely in times of abundance. And I say that because I've had conversations with coworkers, with family, with friends who just thought I was absolutely ridiculous for even taking an interest in this kind of stuff, that have been accused of being a negative or having a lack mindset and things like that. But, these things are not about my desire to want to see suffering or any of it. It is just common sense. We have to wear seat belts because it's the law, but seat belt wearing is a form of mitigation, not just for the risk of an accident, but for the risk of the financial harm that will become to you if you don't have on a seatbelt and you're pulled over by the police. So we're all engaging in these kinds of behaviors that at one level or another are designed to mitigate risk, right? But it takes another kind of thinking to really, and sometimes it takes information that we simply just don't have access to because we're bombarded with videos on BET or comedians or, or just news that trivializes the real information of the world, and we have to go deeper and find it. So let's move on. Are you a strategic prepper or not? What kind of or what level? So my argument is that if you have a refrigerator or not, or if you ever go to the grocery store at some point in a month, you are technically a prepper. You might be a level 1 prepper, where you have enough food to get you through 1 to 3 days. Maybe you're a teenager and, you just got yourself a place and, you're eating out all the time. Like my son who's, on his own and doing his thing, making good money. He's got no time to be cooking food and buying groceries. The world is his oyster, right now. Plus his crazy mama does all that prep work stuff. So he'll just go and take everything she got. But you have level 2 preppers, these people who, like most people, have about 14 days. If you listen to Dr. Claude Anderson, he'll tell you most Black folk got about 14 days worth of food in their home. You're not prepared for anything for a month or beyond that. And then it's perishable what we do have. And then you have the level 3 prepper. This person might have enough stuff for a month. That's the month prepper. They may be able to go for 30 days without going to the grocery store and be okay. Then you have the quarter prepper. This person can get through 90 days of food. And then you have the level 5. My goal is to be and to get everyone in this room to be a level 5 prepper and above. Any questions so far? Let's go into a little bit more about the day prepper. So this person's got, in terms of food and water, no food storage. They may have a pack of sandwich meat in the refrigerator, a loaf of bread, if that, a candy bar, and a soda can. Okay, this is me back in law school or in undergrad, whatever it is. We've all been here at one point or another. There wasn't there. And you got to say next, right? And then you have the week prepper. This is the person who's going to get their food. They may be in an urban environment. Like I used to be in downtown Silver Spring, where I just loved to run to the wall. The Whole Foods was right around the corner for me. I could just walk down and get my little things for the week. And it was so metropolitan. So I could have water for a week. I live in a small efficiency. I could get groceries for a week. I didn't have any food storage. There's a lot of people that don't have that, but they have enough to get them through 7 days, and they're okay with that as a lifestyle. They want that lifestyle. Then you have the month prepper. This person might have children, so they don't like going to Costco all the time. So they might get enough for themselves, their husband or wife, and 3 kids or whatever to get them through a whole 30 days. This person, though, they're going to have a little bit more. They're going to maybe have a case of bottled water in the house. They might have even some long-term food storage. They may have freeze-dried and dehydrated food, and they may have food for 30 days, and they have a 72-hour food kit. Now, this is my level 3 prepper. They're also going to have some personal cash on them at all times. And in terms of warmth, they know enough that they should have some candles and a flashlight to get through a few tough days of tough times. They probably even have a hand crank opener water, maybe even a 72-hour evacuation kit. And they might have enough meds to get them through a month for the kid who might have asthma, just as a normal routine basis. And then they have probably essential oils because they know about the power of peppermint oil applied to the back of the neck and what that might do to get rid of a chronic headache or migraine. And then they may have a battery powered radio. Are y'all paying attention to these little terms that I'm using? Hope so.
Can I
Then,
ask a question?
yes, please.
Okay, I wrote in the chat, what about iodine pills?
Okay.
And what should we get some?
Okay. I am going to address iodine pills a little bit later on. But we will definitely talk about some sources of where you can get that and why you would need it and what it does. Okay.
Good.
All
Thank you.
All right. And so now we have the month prepper we talked about, and then we have the quarter prepper, and this person has got enough food, water, and ways to purify water. The quarter prepper is good for 3 months. They've got at least 160 gallons of water in their home right now. They have water filters and purifiers to get the water that's coming out of their faucet to the level of drinkability or potable, and by their standards. They even have some long-term food storage. They've got freeze-dried and dehydrated foods for 90 days. They've got personal cash and a little bit of silver and a little bit of gold. And they got some things to occupy themselves and their family, like books and games and journals in the event that the TV isn't on. Now, in terms of medical hygiene, the quarter prepper, they're going to have sanitation, they're going to have laundry supplies, they're going to have first aid and some essential oils. They're going to have grid independent communications. We're going to get to that. We're going to have warmth. We're going to have some sleeping bags in case all the electricity's out and it's November and it's a snowstorm. And I just need to get everybody in the living room because we can get the fireplace going or something like that. And then they're going to have tools like rope and duct tape. They're going to have a shovel and knives and can openers and an axe and a siphon pump and a bunga wrench. They're going to have energy like a solar generator or rechargeable lights. And they're going to have portable stove Texas for that boil water alert that they might get every once in a while, and a camp stove. That's the quarter prepper. And then the year prepper, no less than 320 gallons of water per person for the year. They're going to have a water filter and purifier. They're going to have long-term food storage, 400 pounds of grain per person. Remember, I told you I'm going to give you some numbers. The average person consumes 400 pounds of grain in a year. I'll tell you where I get these numbers from. They're going to have about 60 pounds of legumes. Those are your beans, their peas, your nuts, right? Your cashews, whatever those legumes are that you eat. They're going to have 16 pounds of, I put plant-based milk, but I'm vegan, but whatever your milk source is, you need 16 pounds per person. You also need, now you can feel free to take a picture of this. You can, I'm sure you already have, hopefully. You're going to need 10 quarts of cooking oil per person for the year. Now, I know these numbers seem really random and absurd, but there is a science to this number. And you're going to need 60 pounds of sugar or honey and 8 pounds of salt. Now, I know you're thinking this is really absurd. I'm not going to be able to do this. And I'm going to talk to you about why this is actually very doable a little bit. But I just want to throw this out there. This is what you need per person for 1 year. Waste containers to get rid of biohazardous materials from the body, like blood and feces and urine in the event your plumbing goes out for a year. Odor enzymes. Let me tell you something. There is nothing more dehumanizing and demoralizing than when you go to turn on your sink and nothing comes out. It is the most horrific feeling in the world. I have had it happen to me just because I lived in an urban environment and the water would go off periodically because of a pipe burst. Or when I was living in Georgia during the freeze crises where nobody knew how to deal with ice that ran over. It was terrifying. And couldn't get out because we lived on an incline at the bottom of a hill, and the ice was so devastatingly thick that you dared not even try to climb up the ice. There's just nowhere to go. You were stuck for the period until the ice melted. Real story. And privacy tent, I'll tell you why that's important for me as a woman and why it should be important for everyone in here, but especially women. And a portable shower. These are things that you don't think about, but hygiene can really deteriorate the spirit of a person very fast. The inability to wash one's hands, one's face, one's body, oh, it can really destroy your mood. Grid independent communications and medical biohazard protection. We were talking about PPE this week as we were dealing with the possibility of having a health room here and being able to share materials if needed for those seen and unseen circumstances. The sister just mentioned iodide or iodine. Why do we need potassium iodide? Well, a lot of people don't realize this, but in the event of a nuclear threat, a nuclear bomb goes off, the thing that takes the majority of life is not the explosion. That's going to get some folk, but the aftermath where the radiation is going to attack right here, your thyroid. Iodine coats the thyroid and protects it from radiation damage. That's why the sister was talking about it. There's a lot of places that you can get it. There's some sites that I'll share with you later on as well. And then essential oils as well to help deal with viral, bacterial, and parasitic issues that may be present in the body because of the hygiene challenges of like not having water. And now, remember I mentioned a solar generator? Well, here, the year prepper might have a solar generator, but they may also have a fuel or a power generator as well. Okay. All right, now here's what I only have a few more minutes to go over with you, but this is where the 9 basic elements that I promised to deliver to you. Water is number 1. Food is number 2. Communications is number 3. Defense, ladies and gentlemen, number 4. Medical and hygiene needs. Shelter and tools to support and sustain that shelter, liquid assets in the event of a collapse of your metric system, power and light, and books and edutainment. If you have children, this is so important. If you are a human being, this is almost as important as medical hygiene as far as my book is concerned, because people will drive you mad. And when times get tough and things get bad, you want to be able to keep people in a happy place. All right, now, I told you I was going to share you some stories about some recent events that happened that really helped me devise this formula. Now, I'm no mathematician and I'm definitely not an MIT scientist, but I was able to glean after watching what happened to the folk in Katrina, particularly the people of African descent. As Tony Zumbada, the journalist who reported from the NBC said, out of pure anger and desperation, he said, there's nothing offered to them, no water, no ice, no sea rations, nothing for the last 4 hours. Oh, I'm sorry, not hours, days. The last 4 days. Desperate crowds were reduced to chanting, help us, in front of TV cameras while they beg, don't leave us here to die. Racism plus disaster equals hunger times death. Does anybody have a better formula than that? Can anybody prove it wrong?
No.
Somebody said this. I hate the way they portray us in the media. If you see a Black family, it says they're looting. See a white family, it says they're looking for food. Most of the looting that took place was desperate people taking vital essentials, right, Mama Prophet Anyanwu? You heard what the sister said, she gonna take what she need from the prepared, right? Water, food, diapers in order to survive, because racism plus disaster equals hunger times death, family. Now, I want to share this statement because it's stemming from something I learned from my encounter with a Mormon family. Remember I told you I was going to share some stories with you? Well, before I get to that story, I want to talk to you about the fact that there is another organization that I want to put on your radar, and it's called the World Water Council. And they have decided, now pay attention to the decades, right? Because I already told you about Gaia Harrington, who is the advisor to the Club of Rome, and the predictions of the MIT scientists who said they know the exact date or real close to it for what they call the fall of society. And they said that was 2040. Well, the World Water Council says that by 2030, 70% of the world's populations will live in urban settlements. They didn't say metropolitan cities. They said urban settlements. I don't know about you, but that doesn't resonate well with my spirit. In the United States, more than 80% of the total population lives currently in urban areas. And the state of Maryland, where I live, has more than 87% of that population. Washington, D.C., this was a trick question, but what percentage of DC lives in the city? The whole area, the whole zone is a city, so 100%. And then urban dwellers typically don't grow their own food due in part to the cramped living conditions of cities. Hey, New York. But this means that they often rely on the local supermarket for their food. My question to you is, what about you? And as Prophet Anyanwu said, and now look at this precious baby. Everybody deserves water, fresh, pure, clean water. But nothing motivates me more than the needs of our children. So here's what I want you to take some really important notes on, and we're going to go through this real quick, and I will share a PDF document with anyone who sends a text message about water safety to me at 202-952-6123. I'm going to set it up, but if you just text that, I'll have your cell phone number and I'll get that to you as soon as I can. You can just text the word water safety to 202-952-6123, and I will share this part of my slides with you. And this is about how to make water safe during an emergency. So let's say you got a boil water notice. What does that mean? And why boil water? And what if you were in Texas a couple of years ago when they said, oh, don't drink the tap water no matter what? Or what if a notice comes through that says there has been an oil spill and no one who lives in Prince George's County, Rockdale County, or Montgomery County should drink the water until further notice. Oh, and by the way, don't bathe with it and don't wash your dishes with it. Okay, let's talk about the 3 ways that we can make water safe to drink under certain circumstances. So the first way is to boil water. The second way is to disinfect water. And the third way is to filter water. You ever go into a store and see distilled water or purified water or filtered water? And have you ever wondered what's the difference between them? Anyone in the chat, click yes if you've seen those things and just wondered at some point what was the difference. Okay, let me explain. When you boil water, this is known as the best method because this is capable of killing bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Those are the 3 chief threats to making water safe or unsafe, I should say. The next method is disinfecting water. But disinfecting water does not get rid of what, y'all? Can you see? It does not get rid of which one of those 3 that boiling water does. It does not get rid of parasites. But when you disinfect water with the potential way to disinfect water is bleach or chlorine, hypochlorate sodium, regular household bleach, unscented, and I'll explain more about that, or sometimes chlorine tablets, and sometimes other types of disinfectants that come designed to do that, including iodine. These are able to kill most viruses and bacteria. Are y'all learning something? Say something to me. Let me hear it. Let me hear it. Y'all
Yes,
with me?
indeed.
Okay. So boiling
Yes,
water,
ma'am.
boil water. This is your government telling you your water is not safe to drink. You better boil it because there's bacteria, there's viruses, and there's parasites in your water. Watch out. We are not responsible for your life at this point. Okay. The disinfected water is going to kill viruses and bacteria, but not parasites. And filtering water only removes parasites, but it doesn't do anything for bacteria or viruses. So, in a scenario where you have a boil water notice, please be advised that the threat to you is BVP, bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Now, don't worry, I want you to take notes, but I'm going to send you this slide and the slides that are related to this water piece and water boiling and filtering, okay, if you ask for it. Now, disinfecting water, that's a chemical that you add to water. You ever heard of chlorinated water? It's in your pool. It's in the levels in your pool that are so high that you will take off your clothes and put on a bathing suit, and you will ignore the fact that you don't know if the person in the pool has a deadly virus because you trust chlorinated water so much that you're willing to let down your inhibitions and takes a chance. That's chlorinated water. That's how powerful chlorine is, right? That strong smell at the pool. Well, it's also in your tap water. And you can also purify, let's say, some water, there was a flood and you saw that your water was slightly brown. I'm gonna show you what you can do to disinfect water if in fact boiling is not possible, because you didn't listen to Sheila Brown when she said, I want you to get a external heat source so that you can boil water. Boiling water is the most important thing that you can do. Having a way to boil water is even more important than the food. We'll talk about that too. But the average person can go, the rule of threes, right? You can go for 30 seconds on the average person without bad lungs, without oxygen in some circumstances, but you can't go more than 3 days without food, right? I mean, without water, but you can go potentially 3 months without food. So food is the last of your concerns. Water is second, oxygen is first. 30 seconds, 3 days, 3 months. That's the priority. So because you don't own any oxygen reserves, your next priority is how to get your water safe. Y'all with me? This is helpful? Say something. Okay.
We would you.
All right. Filtered water only removes what, family? Parasites. That's why you see the filters and they have those 3 to 4 levels of sand, gravel, charcoal, and sometimes rocks. It's filtering the water through, but it's capturing those bigger parasites. Okay? Disinfecting water is not going to get rid of the bigger parasites. They're more resistant. All right. Now, when I say boil water, I don't mean turn the stove on, start counting for 3 minutes and then turning it off, or boiling the water and turning it off for 60 seconds. I mean, turn the water on high, allow the water to start bubbling. That's what we mean by boil. Once it starts bubbling or boiling, that's when you begin to count. That's when the killing happens. That's when the purification happens. So boil water for 1 minute and let it cool. That's typically the safe way to make water safe that you think is suspicious. Also, if you are at elevations above 6,500 feet, and I have to admit, I'm not really sure where that might be, boil your water for 3 minutes instead of 1. Boiling water is the best method. You can go to cdc.gov and get some more information about this in addition to the tools that you might request from me. Disinfection is very important to know as well. In fact, in your to-go bag, you could and should have a little bottle of Clorox unscented bleach or just bleach, no scent. But what you need to know is that you have to, at the basic level, add the bleach to the water, mix it well, and then wait 30 minutes before using. You actually want to smell the hypochlorite sodium. That's when you know it's safe. But there's some things that you can do to make it taste better. But here's what you need to know. Bleach comes in different percentage levels. The key ingredient, the active ingredient, is usually between 5% and 9%. If you look at your bleach bottle and it says 5% or 9% or something in between that, you only need to add 8 drops of that bleach water. So it's a good thing to have in your toolkit. A what? Anybody? A dropper. Or a little less than 1/8 of a teaspoon. So if you get a little measuring teaspoon, get a teaspoon and you need less than 1/8. That's the equivalent to 8 drops. So I trust 8 drops better. Household bleach to 1 gallon of water. If you don't have household bleach and you're a prepper like me, you're probably going to have something called chlorine dioxide tablets or even iodine. But if you use them, you have to pay attention to the manufacturer's label instructions. I cannot advise you on that. If your water is cloudy, more cloudy than usual, because sometimes you just suspect that your water isn't safe because there was a flood and you're not so sure, you just want to make sure. But if in fact your water is cloudy, it's not pure, when you look at it through the glass, it's cloudy, then you're going to use 1/4 of a teaspoon or 16 drops of water. Disinfection requires a chemical. It requires you to add that chemical to the water, stir it really, really well, and then wait for 30 minutes. If you wait for 30 minutes and you don't smell the chlorine, after you follow these steps, repeat it and do it again and wait another 30 minutes. Okay? Y'all with me?
Yes.
Yes.
I want you to be aware of this very important thing. There is absolutely nothing that
Question.
Yes, Mama.
Okay. I know during COVID, we didn't use Lysol. I used hydrogen peroxide. Is that, is that something we can use or no?
Not for purifying water.
Okay.
To deal with remember the 3 threats?
Right.
Parasites,
Parasites and
viruses, and bacteria.
bacteria and viruses. Okay.
Now, there is something amazing that, so hydrogen peroxide is a real powerful cleanser, but think of hydrogen peroxide, because you know there's 2 types of hydrogen peroxide. There's hydrogen peroxide that is food grade.
Right.
People are actually using for healing, and then there's the kind that you can get over the counter. The kind that you can get over the counter can be very helpful for disinfecting the skin from infections, but it's going to kill everything. It's going to kill the good cells and the bad cells. So sometimes people are not as excited in the medical community about using hydrogen peroxide. I use hydrogen peroxide to help remove bacterial and infections in the mouth, but that's only if you dilute it, right?
And that's the food grade, right?
No, just a regular one. Just if you dilute it with water, you can use it to help. Like, let's say you have a mouth sore, if you have a tooth that's aching, grandmama and them, they will pull out that hydrogen peroxide and even salt water.
Right.
You got some sea salt. So that's a part of your medical kit. I've got salt in all my medical kits, and I have hydrogen peroxide and bleach, right? So, but not for purifying the water, for parasites, bacteria, and viruses.
Thank you.
With me, family? It's making sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It is, yes.
Oh no, we're down to 25 people. Okay. At any rate, all right. So here's the warning. Nothing boiling water, disinfecting water, or filtering water can do. When someone has come on the radio or on CNN or on Fox News and said, listen, family, we hate to tell it to you, but there are harmful chemicals and toxins in the water. We found that pesticides were in the water, or the flood has broken our sewage system. Okay. Remember what we saw recently in the city where the Black community was told, and they showed sisters, and she had 4 or 5 kids on TV, and the water was coming out the tub, and it was brown with no indices of stopping the brownness. And she said, nobody's bringing us water. We can't even wash our hands with this. They said, do not touch it. That's devastation. That's where your water preserves and your water storage. And that's where your to go, get out and go bag is going to come into handy. Now, I'm going to tell y'all an uncomfortable story, but I know this for a fact from women that were on the ground. When we talk about the intersection between racism, violence against women and children, and an asymmetrical, when something is symmetrical, we say that that's beautiful, right? If a person's eyes are level, same size, same shape, that's symmetry, right? Asymmetry is when stuff is messed up. There's a shift, right? Not me, right? We call those people ugly. God forbid, nobody in this room, please don't be offended. But that's the way the world interprets beauty and ugly, largely from a scientific level, right? But in the same way, power happens that way. We've been caught in an asymmetrical power dynamic. We down here and they up here, right? So they control the water, they control the food, they control the disasters, everything, right? And we ain't got nothing but our voices oftentimes and our desire to overcome oppression. So during Hurricane Katrina, there's a sister I know. I was trying to help her get out of that situation, and she did. But she knew some folk that was in the stadium on the ground. When I tell you that sisters were reporting to no avail that the people in uniform who were purporting to the world to be there to protect and defend and comfort the needy were telling those sisters with their babies, if you want some water, you better provide the service of oral copulation if they were lucky. Okay. In other words, you had to reduce yourself to sexual exploitation if you were a Black woman in that stadium to just get water for your babies and yourself. This is what you can expect, family. It's ugly. It's real ugly. And nobody cared. Nobody did anything. There are people that we don't even know about that are missing to this day because of the opportunities for sexual and human trafficking that one event presented to the world. Because the good people do show up, but so do the sexual predators. And they will put on a uniform just as readily as anybody else. And they are opportunistic and evil. So when you couple that with our history of the peculiar institution, so peculiar, they couldn't even just call it slavery. It's a peculiar institution. The people who inherited the power from that, they do not see you as the damsel in distress deserving of rights. When I did the simulation, I was one of about 5 Black women in the American Red Cross volunteering to play a role of a victim living in a shelter. I did it because I wanted to inform my community of what you can anticipate, God forbid, if not out of your own volition. You might be the most prepared person in the world, but someone can knock on your door in a uniform and say, we have an evacuation order, get out of your house right now and get in the truck, right? We're not completely free. So when we were doing the simulation, I was like, oh my God, I'm a vegan. I can't eat this. They hadn't made any plans for people to be vegan. You know how we come? We got special foodies. We ain't eating that. We ain't eating no pork. We ain't eating, honey. It's not what you think it's going to be. So this is the time to arm yourself with knowledge And sometimes, go ahead, Mama Vicky. I see you got your raised hand.
Oh, no, I don't want to interrupt you. And I just wanted to mention something once you wrap up this thought.
Okay. Okay. Tell me when you can just say something now if you want to. It's fine.
Well, this is just so helpful. And you know, the elders used to say, forewarned is forearmed, right? And so for us to not, or for people sometimes to not want to think about something that seems just too big to think about, right? Or as you said, we just do feel so equipped to deal with, well, that doesn't happen here, or, you know, we'll have some advance notice, but we literally are talking about in a good way at the permanent, well, I think it's in a good way. Most of us here think it's in a good way at the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. We are talking about ending the world order as it is, or the world disorder as it is. Do you know what I'm saying? Because currently it inappropriately and genocidally affects people of African ancestry all over the planet, you know, and other people of color. So I'm just saying that, you know, as we've seen, and as you're reminding us and illustrating, even when natural disasters or disruptions or, you know, things not intended to be racially motivated or racially targeted, when they occur, the additional oppression, not just not just negligence, but actual abuse. You know, one of our International Civil Society Working Group members, and we've done so many of these really wonderful human rights education side events, side sessions, and we'll have more through the rest of this week. But one of our speakers on the right to culture and right to education, like I want to say toward the end of last week, Dr. Velva Bowles, an MD out of Louisiana, had mentioned that she said, you know, we really have got, the world must understand that racism, anti-Black racism especially, is structural and systemic, and it has action items. And those points, you know, when she mentioned it that way, it just, it made me think, well, like, we know that, but it how to mitigate to the best extent that we can is so critical, and it's back to basics. Anyway, I was just thinking, you know, you're talking to us who can process this, who can perceive the sense of what you're saying, who maybe are somewhere already on the path of having, you know, a week or 3 months or what have you, at home for whatever reason. I am a caregiver, you know, many know of a late stage dementia loved one. So we can't evacuate. Like, we can't, you know, there's just, nothing happens easily, right? It's horrific, even if you are among the strongest and the most sane and have some resources. So many people are already just, you know, on the edge. Anyway, so I don't know, how do we care for those? And this is not to answer tonight, but I think it's part of this emergency preparedness. We need to maybe add another pillar or add a step next to each of these pillars. How are we going to help care for those who cannot care for themselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead, beloved. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add something to what she said, if that's okay. Because I called the office, I sent a text. I called the Office of Emergency Management. I saw something on the bus, on the back of a bus, and I said, let me just call them. Because, and I know in the 1950s, since I was around, everybody in the country knew what to do. Not that it was going to work, but in the event, you know, the United States, there was a Cold War. So in the event, we knew when to get under a desk, we knew, you know, I lived in public housing, go underneath the building, blah. But the point that you made, when I called the Office of Emergency Management that day to find out what the you know, what kind of public information they give out, the lady said they're uncomfortable giving it out. And anybody could speak to this. They're uncomfortable giving it out because a lot of the people are religious and they think that God is going to take care of them. That's what the woman in the Office of Emergency Management told me. She said that's why they hadn't done, they're not, you know, as far as she knew, they hadn't had no plan. But the fact that she said that, it's like, but we still have to do the footwork.
Yeah, you still have to do it. And they don't have the right to make that determination on behalf. But that's the general attitude, is that There are certain people who are capable of the responsibility of managing the world and life as it happens. And then there are other people who are just children in their mindset. And unfortunately, a lot of times people have proven that to be the case when it comes to these uncomfortable issues, that they would rather just believe for the best and just live today vicariously, just enjoy life. And just enjoy things.
Don't leave that like that.
Interestingly enough, I used to have a teacher when I was in, I think, Montgomery Blair High School, and she used to talk about the exercise that they were taught about during the nuclear war strategies, where you get under the desk. And she would say, they were told us to get under the desk, put our heads between our heads and kiss our goodbye.
Right, exactly.
There's nothing a desk is going to do under those circumstances.
Exactly.
But at least they were engaging, they were mentally preparing people for the possibility that, the world could end, Tiapwiki, as they call it, popularly in the world now, the end of the world as you know it. And I have personally had Tiapwikis in my life all the time where, oh my God, somebody in the family got hurt devastatingly, someone's life was lost. It changes your world instantly. I've personally been through an apocalypse of the fourth kind, with the organization I was involved with. So, there are people who are going through, when you're in Haiti or Katrina, it's the end of the world. The people who were in the midst of that, they thought the whole world was ending. You know what I mean? As far as they knew, this was happening to the world. In their micro experience, the whole world ended with them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know that we continued, that it was just concentrated to that city in Louisiana, which is very devastating.
So to that end, do you recommend people do CERT training or something like that to help prepare and understand resources and the location of resources in their community?
I would say I certainly do. I do because, one, I have come to the conclusion that there are people who are just going to reject this outright from our community. And not until they see it firsthand in their own personal lives will they not do anything to contend with the possibilities. And there's also sorts of reasons why that will be, whether they're religious or spiritual or just the overwhelm, that there's nothing I can do to prepare for this kind of thing. But there is. And like Sister Vicky was saying, what she was referring to is the to-go scenario is not good for me. And people have considered those things as well. And so there is a bug in as well as the bug out scenarios. All we're doing is mitigating. We can never prepare for what we don't know is possible, right? How could anyone have prepared for COVID? But there are plenty of people who were already taking mitigating steps for the circumstances that COVID created, like the inability to move freely, or the possibility that you might need to have some medical supplies on hand, right? So this is a conversation starter. It's certainly not the end all. And there are a lot of segues that we can move into, but we only have 3 hours. And some people will complain about that, right? But what we're trying to really talk about is what has happened since the early 1800s that we've lost to today, because the advances in technology that have completely altered the way we relate to environment and the way we relate to ourselves. Like I was saying, in the 1800s, family was defined by your need for food. Everybody had to be involved with food. People had to go get the potatoes out of the ground. In fact, Booker T. Washington, if you think going to the grocery store and getting rice and cooking it is a big deal, honey, he said, the temptation to go to the rice and get all those grains that are already produced for you and just boil them instead of going into your own garden and picking a potato out of your own ground. He thought that was lazy in the early 1900s. So, we must have really fallen far behind from the ancestor standards in terms of self-sufficiency. But that doesn't mean we drop the ball and don't pretend that there's nothing we can do, because certainly we know that there are some things that we can do right now just to make our water safer by either boiling it, disinfecting it, or filtering it. So there's some small things, some small steps that we can begin to do, including having conversations with our family, our children, our friends, and starting to redirect some of the resources that we might not have thought we had for preparedness to preparedness, like getting an extra bag of rice, an extra bag of greens, instead of maybe one small bag of rice and a big thing of whatever is not necessarily something you need. You know what I mean? Or if you do Netflix, maybe let the Netflix go, and that $14 that you were spending a month, put that towards something. There is a lot of small things that are eating up our money and resources, even if you're on a tight budget. But what I want to share with you too, and if we can get a chance to get through it, let me just say this real quick. And I know there's some other people in the chat. Let me see, and I saw somebody else had their hand raised. Colonized mindset, buy what you need and use what you got. Thank you. That's right, family. Yes, get the iodine and look it up. What do iodine? I think I answered that, Dorothy, but we can come back to it during the Q&A. Very good. And I think we've got some more links in here. We prepared. Yes, I do. Okay. Very good. Thank you, family. So what I wanted to just remind you guys about in terms of that little...
And Sheila?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You want to come back to my, well, I didn't have a question, I had a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this was just real quick, because usually when I hear these conversations, it usually comes up about the church folks who just gonna sit back and wait on God. I want to say something in favor of the spiritual piece, and but also a bit instructive, is that part of maybe churches need to do is to teach. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I've gone to some trainings with some police officers for self-defense, particularly for women. And they said in 95, 98, something like that % of women who were assaulted had a gut feeling. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to throw out the spiritual piece, because it is, I think, should be a critical part of a survival kit. Because when all else fails, all you have is that. And the problem that we have from the spiritual standpoint part is that it's not really religion we're looking at, that we haven't been taught to follow that. We're taught to follow something else. But if we can fine tune that while we're waiting and getting our food and all that, that I know it saved my life when someone had a gun in my side, but it saved my life because I hadn't really followed my gut. But anyway, they found that not just in the church setting, they found it in their work as police officers. I had someone who had went to a place with her boyfriend. She didn't want to go, but he wanted to go, and she gave in because the friends' peer pressure and all that. She went to the bathroom and was assaulted. But she had said, yeah, she's something, or in our culture, we said spirit said or something said, but that something said is actually, so we do have some internal supports as well when all else fails that does work. We call it religion, we call it spiritual, and we put it all together, but it's not exactly the same, because it is 100% reliable. I can tell you that. So it's not guesswork. We just have to fine tune it like we're sharpening a knife or something. Yeah. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Queen. And thank you for sharing that. And I completely agree with you. In fact, one of the stories that I don't have time to tell you is how I got even involved with long-term food storage. It has to do with what I thought was a curse, because nothing happened for me. Like, I was doing this amazing work. Things were going so well for me. I was working in Atlanta. Like, I was just getting it, just bobbing. And then it just came to a complete and total halt. Just stop. Like, one day somebody just said, we have no more work for you. And I could not get a job anywhere. It was so devastating. And I ended up having to go out of state. I would leave my house on Sunday at 2:00 in the morning, leave my baby. So, oh my God, it was just terrible, terrible time. I just literally felt cursed. And I would drive all the way to North Carolina. And I couldn't figure out why my life was so complicated. And ended up happening was, a girlfriend who used to be in Atlanta had started working for one of the law agencies that I was trying to get employed with. And they were hiring only on a temporary basis because they could exploit people like that, right? And so I asked her, can I please stay with you? So it's like, I'll pay you. I don't know anybody here. I don't want to be in a hotel. And she was like, nope, I got a man. So remember, I told you this is all about storytelling, right? And some of the real things that happened. So I was having a personal crisis, stimulated, not because I wasn't qualified, not because there even wasn't work, but the woman who was an administrator who didn't like me, and arguably I could say, and I felt very strongly, it's just because she was racist. She had people that she liked, and there were some Black people that she did employ, but that doesn't mean racism doesn't occur. And so she would take her anger towards me for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe I looked like somebody, or maybe she just didn't like me. Who knows what the reason was? No one can really know the heart of a man. She just wouldn't give me work, and I couldn't get work anywhere. And y'all are saying, oh, something wrong with you, but I'm trying to tell you, it was the weirdest thing. So I was driving all the way to North Carolina, and the sister was like, I got this cute guy. No, 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 no. So she said, but I will tell you that another sister I know has been renting a room from these people. So I went to these people, and as soon as I walked in the place, I felt completely relaxed. I knew I was safe. I knew how somehow I was supposed to be there. And so I'm going into Neely Fuller mode because this is public and everybody can hear it. But one of the days that I was there, I noticed above my head that there was this box and it said emergency preparedness. Long story short, that was the whole reason for the experience. And it's part of why we're having this conversation today, because I encountered a group of people from this experience whose religious doctrine dictated that they incorporate emergency preparedness so deeply as a part of their lifestyle that they are required to have a year's supply of food, water, medical supplies, and other things to support their entire family as a community. That's another story for a not so public session. But what I walked away from that with was a great deal of knowledge about buying food in bulk, how to store water. And I didn't realize it, but when I walked in the garage, if it had been a snake, it would bite me. There was this huge gallon it was a huge blue gallon. I didn't think anything of it. I was completely oblivious to it. And it contained, because one day I asked the young lady, what is this? And she's like, oh, that's this because we're this. And I was like, huh? And she was like, yeah, we're this. This is our religion and this is what we're required to do. And I was like, really, Neil? And she took me through the house, and everything that I had been seeing right there in my face suddenly crystallized that this was food storage long-term. So I know we're strapped for time, and I know we've got folks in here who are co-chairing and we can't take up their time. But remember, the sister earlier had mentioned that there are some sources of water in your home. I actually had a little quiz and things like that, but sometimes you just kind of got to go with spirit and spend time where the time is needed. And so I don't feel like this is a loss, but these are what are called proper water storage containers. You cannot store water in just anything. And believe it or not, in this bathtub, which is a terrible place to put water that's potable for drinking. But with this tube, this skin that is in the tub that's holding the water, you can't see it because it's clear, but there's actually a skin inside of the tub that's keeping the water safe from the chemicals and the bacteria, viruses that are in the tub. So that's potable water, meaning it's safe to drink. Potable water. I want you to write that word down. That means that's water that's safe to drink, water that's safe to bathe with, and water that's safe to wash your dishes and clothes with. Okay, so the container has to meet certain specifications. You see this 320 gallon tank? That's 160 at the bottom and 160 at the top. It can come through any door in an average home, and it doesn't take up much space. I have one of these in my home right now. People walk into my living room all the time and they have no idea that it's there because I've decorated it with beautiful fabric, and it just looks like it's a part of the beautiful plant life that I have in my home. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about plant life, but this was the 55 gallon that I walked past in Amberley's house for weeks and didn't realize that I was walking past her water emergency storage. Now, here's what you need to know. You cannot store water for long-term purposes in anything that looks like this. That's including the things that you buy water in, like the gallon. This is not designed for anything considered long-term, a year long. If you put 100 of these in your basement thinking you're good, you're going to come back in 6 months and your basement is going to be flooded. This is a milk carton. This is not appropriate for long-term water storage. It is not safe, and it is not designed to hold it. It must be a food grade plastic. It must be sterilized with a little bit of water and bleach before it's used. And it must be, when you get containers like this, you must also remember, never put it directly on concrete. This material will absorb the ground beneath it. So I would say get yourself a piece of untreated plywood, flat plywood, earth, right? Because this is the earth element is the only thing you want to put under here. Even though it's a plastic container, it's food grade. So only put a piece of earth under it, like a piece of untreated plywood to keep it, because the plastic will absorb the the chemicals that are in the ground and bring it into the water. Now, when you do water like this, you also have to treat it so that it can last for 5 years. Okay. I have used this water even in the absence of a tornado or a lockdown, because my apartment building would just at random times tell me, oh, sorry, the water's off. We're not sure when it's going to be on. And I would just keep on moving because I prepared for personal crises. That's a personal crisis. All right. You need to treat and access your water easily. So your water, you need to be able to have a clean, and you need to be able to access it with a pump. You need a food grade pump or a siphon and some water purification devices or tablets. These are items we consider essential in the prepper community. They can either be germicidal or chlorine dioxide as a safe way to use under the manufacturer's instructions. But to prevent accidental absorption of concrete fumes or trapped stagnant odors, because sometimes the water is safe, it just stinks. And there's some things that you can do for that, but you don't want to store your filled water barrel directly on cement. So when you got your stuff in that parking lot, make sure you put a piece of untreated wood between the barrel and the cement. I know we're going to go fast. I want to say really quickly this about food. So there's a statement that I have heard from this community that I studied, and because I'm in English fully mode, I'm not going to say it because I know we're live, but many more people, this person said, could ride out the storm-tossed waves in their economic lives if they had their year's supply of food and clothing and were debt-free. Today, however, we find that many have followed this counsel in reverse. They have at least 1 year's supply of debt and food-free. What can't we afford? It's going to definitely take some mindset shifts, but we can reverse the destructive financial behaviors that prevent us from prioritizing need over want in some cases, okay? So here's what I really want to run through quickly about long-term food storage, because remember I kept talking about dehydrated food, canned food, the threats to food. So here's what I need you to know on steroids real fast. Food can last for 25 years under the right conditions. What you're going to need are these silver bags. They're called space bags or Mylar, M-Y-L-A-R. You need food grade buckets. You cannot just go to Home Depot or Lowe's and get the cheapest bucket you can find. And you need these little things that are called oxygen absorbers. You see them sometimes in your regular everyday cosmetic bags or in your purses. These are things that help extend the life of stuff because they simply remove the oxygen from it. I'll tell you a little bit more. There's a big threat. Remember what the 3 threats were to the water? BVP. Y'all remember what they were? Say it with me. Bacteria, viruses,
parasites, and viruses.
Well, food has an enemy too. And the enemy of food is air, right? The oxygen absorbers are designed to treat that. Water is the enemy of food. And if you look really carefully, you see this fake looking butterfly. That's not a butterfly. This little guy is the enemy to your food. He is a little fly that looks like a moth. and they have eggs. So really, I tell people all the time, jokingly, of course, but there's really no such thing as a vegan because we're all eating parasite eggs. It's in every piece of food. If you've eaten cornmeal, if you've ever had a cake mix, if you eat rice and whole grains, if you've gotten beans and legumes, even fresh vegetables, you've eaten some parasite eggs. You eat them all the time. If you have a healthy immune system, your body will expel it fast. If you do flushing and detoxes, you'll help rid your body of them. But we all eat parasite eggs. In fact, the FDA approves that your peanut butter has a certain number of fly eggs and even rat feces in it because large manufacturing cannot stop these things from occurring. My question is, who counts the fly eggs? But that's a southern point. My other point to you is that the threat to this food are this little bug. Why is the name of the bug? Weasel. The weevil is the threat to your food. And there's another little guy. The weevil is very important because it's not the bug, it's his eggs. If the eggs can survive, you're going to go into your 25-year storage and you're going to find dead bugs in 25 years in half of the rice, right? Because they can, as long as they have a little bit of moisture and some food, they are going to thrive on your food and then they're going to kill themselves off. So you got to be really, really careful. And these little guys, these weevils, they love flour, cornmeal, cake mixes, rice, whole grains, beans, and legumes. You know what they can't eat? Corn. They can eat cornmeal, but they can't break the kernel of the corn for some reason, interestingly enough, right? So that's a little thing to know about. Now, these are different pictures of how to store long-term food, including the root cellar. But I'll tell you this, I used to have an efficiency in downtown Silver Spring because I loved the idea of my son having access to his food, his job, his whatever. And Dr. Vicky and Mr. Sheldon, please tell me in the chat or interrupt me if it's an absolute cutoff. But until you do, I'm just going to run as fastly as I can through this. Okay, just let me know how to proceed. You can tell me now if you want to.
We're a little over time. People seem like they are staying, but I know normally, we want to be respectful of just people's needing to stand up and move a little bit. You think you can wrap up in 5 minutes?
I will definitely wrap up in 5 minutes, even if I don't completely finish things, but I will run through as
and then they'll have to call you and invite you to their organizations or homes or clubs or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Okay. All right. So
Okay.
I'll just say this because this is important. You see this cute little picture here? I wanted to show this to you because Harold Lee is a guy who I've studied, and he says, if you knew what I knew, you would put it in the middle of the floor, put a cloth over it, and walk around it. What he's referring to is your supplies for food and water. In the event of a crisis, it's not going to take people really long to figure out that they're hungry and that they don't have money and that they don't have access to force, but they can break the window in your home. They can test the waters to see how prepared you are with your security and take what you got. So many people have endured this in different countries, and even in the prepper community, they're bracing for this to be the case, especially people like me and some of the big preppers who are out there with YouTube channels like Canadian Prepper. They know people, they brag all the time. They show you their reserves. So there are some people in law enforcement even that may say, you know what, we don't have it, but we know who do, right? They may come to you and offer services, or they may just strong arm you. So the smart people have learned to camouflage their food instead of just putting all of their reserves in the basement, like is indicated in some of these pictures, especially if you're in certain circumstances where space is tight. So here's something to consider. Find clever ways to place your long-term food storage so that it's a part of your lifestyle and it's not obvious. Now, this is what 400 pounds of grain looks like. So you're looking at millet, you're looking at red berry, looking at white berry, cornmeal, grains of different sorts. It is possible to get 400 grains of food, but if you try to go into Whole Foods right now and get 400 grains, somebody will probably call the police on you, right? We already showed you that you need 400 grains, 16 pounds of oil, I think it was 8 pounds of salt, 16 quarts of oil, I wanted to say how many pounds of sugar it was. I think it was like 80 or whatever it is, right? These are what they look like, and you can preserve these. What I wanted to make a distinction to between is freeze-dried food versus dehydrated food. You can see the visual representation of that. It is much more expensive to get freeze-dried food, but you are getting food and it is highly nutritious. It reserves something more than 80% of the natural nutrients, and it's because the way freeze-dried foods are processed. I can go into that later. Dehydrated food is good as well. It serves its purpose. It's certainly calories, but you lose more than 50% of the nutrients when it's dehydrated, plus the passage of time. The way freeze-dried food is stored, it allows you to store for up to 25 years, and those nutrients, they taste so fresh and so good, and you can cook them or you can eat them just like this. Growing a garden, pretty self-explanatory. Here's one of the other pillars, communications, right? You need to have a multi-powered radio, NOAA, all-purpose radio, so that in the event that the power grid goes down, TVs are no longer accessible, you can tune into the NOAA station and hear about what's happening in the world. You want it to have 5 ways to power. That includes solar power, hand cranking, batteries, electricity, and what's the 4th one that somebody can probably come to mind?
You said solar. Did you say solar?
Yeah, there's solar power, battery, hand cranking. Like there is literally radios that you
Right.
can use your hand and manually crank up the energy. There's a 5th way, it'll come to me. Also, believe it or not, having 2-way communication. So if you're fortunate enough to have someone in your household that's also in alignment with you, and you guys are separated by a couple of yards, or one person is one part of the space and another person's in another part, or you're just traveling some distance, having a 2-way radio is an excellent form of communication. I do have both of these. Power and lights, experts, of course, predict that by 2040, the world is scheduled to fall as a society, as the end of the world as we know it. So having either a power or a fuel generator, having other forms of solar generated e-bulbs, and having ways to power your devices. You also want to have medicine and hygiene. Get yourself a really good first aid kit. You can buy it or you can make it yourself based off of your family's individual needs. And there are some companies now that even allow you to purchase actual medications. And I'll share some of the prepper channels that I like to listen to, including the Canadian prepper. I think he's my favorite. And they have a company that they get medical supplies from called Jace. I think it's JACE or JASE. I haven't gotten any. There are some natural biotics like grapefruit seed extract. It is an extract, and grapefruit seed extract is a natural antibiotic. You got to be careful with it. You don't need that much. Getting some type of liquid assets. There's actually a company in Utah that has found a way to reduce gold to such a thin layer that it can be formed into little dollar bills that look like little dollar bills, but they're actually used as a currency exchange, and it's pure gold in Utah. They call them Utah bucks. And Sheldon might know about that. And then there are small companies that are allowing regular people to invest in small quantities of silver. Silver is on the stock market. It is almost always increasing in value. It is used by NASA. It is used in equipment. It's used in electronics. And it is one of the most powerful mediums of exchange, and it's very affordable comparatively. And then, of course, books and edutainment. Okay, I don't know who wrote this book, but it's called Divinity Soup, and it's by someone by the name of Sheila Brown. And thank you so much for your time, family. I appreciate your being here, and I hope I did not disappoint you too badly. But that is the 9 pillars of emergency preparedness that I wanted to brace, and I wish I had more time because there's so much more to share. Thank you.
You need a part
Excellent.
2.
Thank you.
You need a part 2. Yeah, that this was
Part 2.
outstanding. Thank you so much. We appreciate everyone. We hope you saw the notes in the chat about side events from the International Civil Society Working Group for the Permanent Forum tomorrow and Friday, and also a link to our charter if you're interested in knowing more about the group or keeping in touch with the group or, being part or what have you.
Can you send
Yep.
something to everybody that came on afterwards?
I
if that's
sure
okay? Thank you.
Sure will. And my apologies that I couldn't have my camera on. Oh boy.
No, I
Thank you
didn't have,
so much, Sheila Brown.
I was in the car, so I missed a lot to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question, please. If that's,
Go ahead.
I know we're running out of time. I'm going to hurry up. I believe Sheila said something regarding preparation of water, and she shared her phone number. So could she repeat that number, please? And we were supposed to write water.
Yeah, I'll text you the part about the 3 ways to purify water or to make water safe. And that was 202-952-6123. And you can just text the word water. It'll probably send it to you after our UN events, but I will.
Thank you.
And also that's
Shiva,
number
can you repeat that slowly, please?
yeah, and I'll put it in the it in the chat, but that number is just for texting, and it's 202-952-6123. And I have a link that I want to share with you guys, if you don't mind, so that I could get you to fill out a what do you call it?
Survey.
Yes, that's the word. Sorry about that. I would like to drop the link in. If you guys don't mind filling that out for me, would be very helpful. If I cannot find that link, which is for some reason trying to evade my life right now, which is very frustrating. Then I will say, if you would be so kind as to email me any thoughts that you have. It could be in the form of a quote. And then I can send you the link later, but my email address is info@SheilaBrownSpeaks.com. And if you don't mind, right now, while it's still fresh on your mind, please send me a review. It could be a sentence or two about what you felt about this workshop. And then I will also have your email address, and I can send the water supply slides to you that way as well. But there's a lot of resources out there, and I'll put together a resource sheet for the things that I wasn't able to cover, but this is my email address. It could be a written statement, if that's all you can do right now. And if you are interested in doing a written testimonial, then you can call me at 301-388-5273. And
573.
we'll do something to be able to get that. But for some reason, I can't find my link.
I'm going to toss in one other thought, and thank you so much. This was so engaging, and so many people stayed on for the full time. So I'm not the only one that thought it was extremely valuable and extremely well done. But I wanted to say to everyone here, if you are thinking of recommendations related to what you just heard here, recommendations for the Permanent Forum members to consider with regards to, how this relates to any of the themes, reparatory justice, from this session of the Permanent Forum. Some of these things that we discussed are, reparations issues, or can prevent future harm, right? And so whether Pan-Africanism, transnational migrations, health, a lot of this is related to that, health equity, and data, disaggregated data collection. If this particular topic and side event brings to mind a recommendation or a conclusion that you think that Attorney Sheila should share in her write-up and feedback from this side event, that would be awesome to send that to her as well.
Very good, Green. That's a great
and I think because this was free, I know I'm definitely going to talk to City Council to see if they can bring her in for a presentation. Of course, they should pay her. And I'm not a religious person, but I do have a lot of people who are really engaged and encourage them to have her come to speak to their church to do a PowerPoint or whatever and get paid. So, you know, maybe other people could think about things like that, because I think this was a treasure. This was definitely, I mean, this
Yes.
just worked out. And I'm supposed to be on something regarding nuclear war now, so I gotta leave. But you know, how we could prevent nuclear war for all this craziness. So anyway, thank you guys so much. I just bumped into this on When Black Women Chat. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna talk to Helen, who's the, I guess, owner of Black Women Chat, the whole format, to see if she'll bring Sheila on for that specifically, you know, one Sunday. So okay, ladies, thank you
Excellent.
so much.
I
This
just
is a
found the
true
survey
treasure.
link, by the way, family. So if you see,
I did.
okay,
I'm going to send it to you. Take care. Thank you
Thank
so
Peace
much.
and blessings. Thank you.
you. The survey link is in there, family. So if you just click it before you leave out, you can fill it out. It's not very long, and it will help me tremendously try to prove myself,
Let's
because
see
you know
if I
folks
can
want
do it.
credentials.
Yeah. All right.
And
I'm gonna do it
Sheila,
now.
real quick, I think training the trainers, because this is information that needs to be gotten out. They say 2040, some say 2024. So it is not something that we have 10 years to mess around with, but getting the
Exactly.
education and knowledge is the critical piece, which you provided. But getting a package that can go international, translated. So you train the trainers. I don't know if you're able to do that, but somehow you need others doing this, because you want to reach Black folks globally, because we will be the ones that get hit the hardest. And we're not no 40, 20 years off. So that's just
Yeah.
Nope. The end of the decade.
not even the end of the decade. If we
Right.
get out of 2023 into 2024, we'll be blessed.
That,
So
no,
I'm just
that's the decade I meant. I meant
Yeah.
our
oh,
The
okay.
one we're
Oh, that
in.
ending.
decade. Yeah, that
Mhm.
decade. Yeah. Thank you. That
Right.
is absolutely
Yes.
so
And
Yeah.
I
don't
totally
forget,
agree with you,
remember
ladies.
to do some more research on Gaia Harrington, the Club of Rome, because when you hear the way people talk about her, it's almost like they don't even need to introduce her. Nobody gives her
Wow.
resume. There's no credentials. She is one of the key thought leaders globally, and she's situated in where did the Danish live?
In Denmark.
Denmark.
Denmark. Mhm.
Can you please put her name in the chat if you don't mind?
Yeah, make sure I
Is that possible? Or just spell it for me?
And we're doing a survey, Sheila, but your presentation is excellent. You know where to, well, you know how to speak. You're a good speaker, so you speak could speak before anyone. So just training the trainers, because to get it translated in all the languages that we talk about need to be in, and get it ASAP. This is like the 11th hour for a lot of this stuff. It's been talked about for a lot of years, but this is the way it is. But getting it out to, not, because I think, my city hall here, who thinks that we don't need a plan for earthquakes, but I see it's well beyond that. It's well beyond that. And we're well into it. Somebody dropped a bomb, something in Russia the other day. It's well beyond any of that. So it does need to be in the recommendations, Dr. Vicky said, but as a train, somehow to get people educated to teach, others, basically. So
Yeah,
how to multiply yourself.
A lot of the brothers and sisters on the continent, they know what water shortage is, which is incredible because they're surrounded by water. But there's some brothers and sisters in South Africa that they only drink water that has been treated with bleach, because they don't have good disinfection. I talked with a sister, she went to South Africa and she was bringing some of her herbal treatments, and she said, Sheila, the water is so bad, you can see the parasites floating in the eyes of everybody. You can see them.
Well, so, Sheila, you mentioned early on essential oils, and I'm gonna shut up with this. So I just say that essential oils is what we keep. I don't really do bleach, but clove kills and oregano kills. They kill parasites and stuff too. But so we just need to do some research. But you've mentioned all those things. But just if you don't have bleach, and I don't drink bleach, but I use lemon and clove and peppermint and those things. So there are a lot of ways to do it. But the bottom line is most people don't have any kind of plan, right? They don't have any idea what to do when it happens. So we just really need to get even this week. I mean, this was great. If you have something you can put out there and tell them, and you need to just lead it. I know you do the other stuff too. You need to just this year, this month, so that if we get to somebody saying June 1st, somebody saying September 1st, somebody saying 2024, but we're at that kind of an hour that it's not So anyway,
No, we
good
are.
job.
And I
Thank
was
I mean,
you.
telling
there were
you,
so many caveats of the discussion that we could have gone down that will address
yeah.
some of
I
those
know.
other things. But it just,
Like I
we're
said,
just
do a
so
whole
strapped
conference,
for
do a Sheila
time.
Brown conference, do a Sheila Brown emergency preparedness
You
conference.
know
Yeah.
what? I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Real quick. I don't know if Sheldon is still on, but can he stop the YouTube live stream? Because I
Baba
forgot.
Sheldon.
I don't know if he's still.
Oh, that's a good idea. Sorry about that.
Because
Some
if
things
we,
I try not to
I
say
didn't even
live.
think about it. Because if we were on Zoom, we would have just stopped the recording.
Thank you, everybody who joined. We really appreciate your time. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much. And thank you, ICSWG, for facilitating this. This is incredible. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's amazing. Okay, we'll drop and just call you back. Peace and blessings, everyone.
Okay, can I
You
save the
too.
chat
Thank
before
you
we go?
all.
Can I save the
Thank
chat?
you.
Because I don't think I got all of this stuff. How do you save the chat? You know how to do that?
Yeah, more, those 3 buttons,
Uh-huh.
and then click on chat,
Right.
and then go to the bottom. There should be 3 buttons, 3 little dots toward the end of the last comment, and it'll give you the option to
Save chat.
copy. I got you. I'll send it to you. Yeah, that's for everybody. You should be able to just save the chat because people left such good comments and shared contact information and so forth.
Okay, great.
Did you get it?
Yeah, because I couldn't see everything people were saying.
I know, but you did a beautiful job. I learned so much. I really, my heart goes out to other people. Like y'all have to come get me because I can't evacuate easily.
And that's important too, you know, but even having that as a part of the plan, did we stop the live part yet?
No, I'll hang up and we'll call you out. Oh my word, who said that? Was that Amra Ray?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, 1 second. I just wanted to read this. This should be a national Juneteenth curriculum at Sheila Brown.
Oh,
I think that's from S. Amra Ray, professor. Wow.
Can we call? Can you call me Mama Ray? Can we call?
Yeah, hold on. I'm sorry. Who was just trying to speak? Who was just trying to speak?
Sister Dot.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to ask, I know block captains don't pay for people to come out, but between churches and I can't say churches, but I know block captains. Can I get anyone to come out do a presentation?
Absolutely. I'll come.
Okay, let me see if I can
she's the
set up
knowledge.
and get as many block captains as I can to come in, and we just sit down. Cause you know most of us is African American.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
we're beyond the point where money is the priority with this. At this point, I just need to get this stuff off of my chest and, you know, prepare myself to be able to return to the ancestors with some dignity and say I try to do something, you know. So I believe I believe that a way will be made so that my needs will be met. But definitely, you know, we just need to at this point, we just need to save a family with as much information as possible. And even if we do something virtually, but I do sometimes when I come, like I did at a presentation in Capitol Heights, and I brought all my emergency supplies and I did demonstrations and I showed people how to do it. Now I probably won't be able to do all that because that's hard, but because there's so
It's
much.
just an idea, Sheila. You can get paid and then do a Zoom where people can come free, but the people who had the money paid you.
That's what I was
nice.
saying.
Like
This is
that.
a CLE too. This is CLE credits. It's CCDU
Or you could just drop your
credit.
Cash App in the chat, and people who want to can bless you right now for everything you just given us.
Oh yes,
That's a good idea.
That's Dr. LaWanna
Nice
Richmond.
That's a good idea.
Okay, let me see.
Yeah, because well, let me be quiet.
I have your
Well,
number. I
this
can
is a blessing because I told
They're
y'all at the
not gonna
beginning.
ever let us live stream to YouTube again. I know that much.
Well, you know, it's so funny. I told y'all at the beginning that the directive I got from the divine was you need to leave your job by May 30th. And I did that.
Something?
Like that was the directive. You need to go by May 20th.
Wow.
So Sheila, what's your Your email address is in here. That's what we cash up you to.
Oh, no, the phone number 281. Okay,
What's the
actually,
phone number?
let me put it in here. Can I just put it in there? Because that's my personal phone number and I think we're still live.
Text it. Is it your personal one? Because I may have it. Text it.
Yes, that phone number. Yes, the one
So-
you have.
So can
Well,
we,
my
we're gonna,
hashtag is $. I can put it in
Okay.
here.
Hold on a second.
$. It's LHC, all caps, LHC, and then the number 9, and then
Okay.
LLC. So $LHC, the number 9, LLC, which stands for Lighthouse Consulting LLC.
So, okay.
Thank
And this
you,
is
ladies.
for the 9 pillars, huh?
Yeah. I used to have a different name, but I came up with that one because I wanted to just focus on the 9 pillars, but I was like, if I don't give this background contextual information, it's just going to get lost. Like, it's so important that we spent that time with the Club of Rome and Gaia Harrington, because these are the movers and shakers that are even over the UN, the former League of Nations, and they're using Rome very intentionally.
yeah,
And they take this stuff very seriously, and they're doing simulations. They're
it
prepping.
is serious.
They're prepping their people. And
Ooh.
what's incredible is when you hear the experts talk about Mrs. Harrington, it's total and complete deference. And this is a relatively young woman, at least according to this picture. So
Yeah.
her rank in the world, she's making very important decisions. Just look up some of the articles. Thank you, Empress. Thank you for being here. Just look at some of the articles, and she's telling the world leaders, you must be prepared to make tough decisions. Some people will interpret some of the language as culling and population control, right? So we're going to be careful with how we speak. We're on no Neely Fuller mold. But yeah, I mean, we need
Well,
to.
yeah, and I was gonna say there was a very, I assume it was recent, but someone sent me a very interesting Snapchat that made that same kind of observation about a former, just very, how do I say, a former high level, I want to say the words are political operative because that's what it is, and diplomat who lived to be 100 and was feted and celebrated and so forth, well known, household word. And the commentary from this political satirist, I guess, was that it's a shame of the multiple millions, literally, it was like incredible numbers of people who did not live to be 100, didn't even live to be 40, 50, or 60 based on some of the policies that, came under the leadership, under the watch, or even under the directive of this individual. And they had, when they were holding the offices that they held, and they had, quotes and recordings and things like that of comments that, were basically saying, well, you have to make hard decisions and, directives to different governments and nation states that resulted in genocide and culling and all of that. So it is the world that we live in. And, we do need to be able to talk about it. And the Permanent Forum is a time when we are supposedly speaking, not only without penalty, but invited to come and share for joint solutions. And yet a lot of times we do know there's definitely retaliation and silencing and so forth. So the information you're giving is free, readily accessible. You shared it so freely and so professionally. It doesn't have a color, right? Anybody, any human being could use it and benefit from it. But you're offering it to your community. And that's a beautiful thing. And I really thank you for that.
Looks like we lost her. Did we lose her?
I'm not sure, maybe. She's probably tired. Anyway, take good care.
Once you get
Everybody
off, because I accidentally pushed the button the other day and I couldn't get back in, but I don't see her name.
Nope,
Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah.
It was great.
And
Thanks, everybody. Thanks you.
take good care.
Enjoy.
Thanks,
Peace and
everyone.
blessings. Absolutely.
was busy.